Okay, let's continue.
Thank you, Chairperson. Mr. Molefe, before lunch, we were dealing with Neotel stroke T systems. I'd referred you to the evidence of Ms. Chetty, and we'd spoken about Mr. Filming. I'd like, for the first time, to take you to the evidence of Mr. van der Westhuizen. That evidence you find at Exhibit BB7. The number of files, it's BB7 little a. And if I could ask you please to turn to page 7. Mr. van der Westhuizen, incidentally, is a chartered accountant, and the Material Times appears to have been an executive manager, Office of the Chief Information Officer. Now, at paragraph 23, he refers to a meeting. He says, during November 2013, I was called to a meeting with Mr. Molefe, and he cites certain other people. And he says at paragraph 24, when we arrived at the meeting, we were requested by Mr. Molefe's personal assistant, if I recall correctly, to hand over our cell phones to her before we entered his office. We all did so. I found the request to hand over my cell phone to be strange due to the fact that I previously attended at least one other meeting in Mr. Molefe's office on which occasion I was not requested to hand over my cell phone. You want to just comment on that?
No, I have no comment.
Did it happen or not?
It did happen.
You did ask him to hand over his cell phone?
Yes.
Why?
Because I wanted to discuss this tender of Neotel and T-Systems. They were IT people, and it is known that it's possible to listen to meetings through the cell phones of people, or the meeting could be taped by one of the participants. So I did not want that to happen, just for security reasons. Security of information reasons.
For information leak purposes?
Yes.
All right. At paragraph 26, Molefe indicated that he didn't support the recommendation to issue a letter of intent to Neotel as the preferred bidder, and that he intended to award the tender to T-Systems, as he was of the view that the 248 million discount offered by T-Systems, referred to in Annexure H3, was valid and should have been taken into account. He also advanced other considerations.
Yes, Chairperson, that was not the main reason of the 248 million. The main reason was the issues that I advanced in my memorandum.
Then he says over the page at paragraph 27, I didn't agree with the reasons advanced by Mr. Molefe during the aforesaid meeting. In this regard, one, even if the 248 million discount offered by T-Systems was taken into account, T-Systems would still only have been the second best bidder. He says at sub 2, I informed the meeting that the objection by Mr. Molefe that there should be concentration risk, or there would be concentration risk at Transnet, his Neotel's largest client, was without merit. He says, I explained X, Y, Z. And then sub 3, Mr. Molefe further informed the meeting that he had received a letter from one of Neotel's BBEE partners or shareholders, which contained an allegation that Neotel was busy diluting its shareholding, etc. Do you want to comment on that?
Yes, I have a very vague recollection, but I think I may have referred to the fact that there is a corporate action. A corporate action was the sale of corporate action was a sale of not Neotel actually, the other one, T-Systems. Actually, this paragraph doesn't make sense, but what I do recall is that there was a discussion of the corporate action involving, no, the incumbent. Who was the incumbent again?
You're looking for the company that was enjoying.
That had won the tender.
Neotel.
Neotel, yeah. Neotel, yes, it's Neotel, yes.
All right, and then below that, paragraph 28, I then realized that my objections were not being well received. I remember feeling at the time that for me to proceed with the verbalization of my objections would be tantamount to professional suicide. In simple terms, I felt that I would be placing my career at risk if I didn't shut my mouth there and then. Upon this realization, I didn't take any further active part in the meeting. Want to comment on that?
No, I can't comment on that.
Now, if you go to paragraph 33, it says, this is at page,
However, Chair, I would say that the feeling that he had that his career would have been in jeopardy was misplaced. Because what subsequently happened is that I was advised by people who were junior to me to proceed with what we were doing, and I listened. So it was in the spirit of collaborative management.
so could I please take you back to page 5 and paragraph 15.
15.
Page 5, paragraph 15. At paragraph 15, Mr. van der Westhuizen sets out that there were 5 bidders who submitted proposals. We know one was Neotel, and then we also know one was T-Systems. That was number 5 at 15.5. And you see there, T-Systems South Africa Pty Limited. It was a bid made in collaboration with Broadband Infraco.
Yes.
You see that?
Yes.
Could now go to paragraph 33 at page 9. He says, I wish to highlight the fact that T-Systems tender was submitted in collaboration with Broadband Infraco. Company registration documents for the latter company show that Salim Essa was a director of BBI and resigned as a director on 14 October 2010. I'll show you now that that should be 2014. My understanding is that BBI is a state-owned entity and it was tendering with T-Systems. See that?
Yes, Chair. I knew that Broadband Infraco was a state-owned entity.
Yeah.
But I did not know that Salim Essa was a director of Broadband Infraco.
Well, I take it that you won't. I can take you to exhibit BB7 little b at page 348 if you want. It's the CIPRO record. Could you go there?
Which one? BB7.
BB7 in brackets little b.
Yes.
If you could turn, please, to page 348.
Yes.
There's a CIPC company search. If you turn to 349, you go to the foot of the page and then you count up 10 lines from the bottom. So from the bottom up, you'll see reference twice to Mr. Salim Essa, and you see that he resigned on 14 October 2014. So at this time,
Number 10 from the top.
From the bottom, count up 10.
I just want to make a note just below 2010 at page 9, where 2010 is given instead of 2014, to refer to that bundle and that page, Mr. Mybeck. So that would be C bundle.
Sorry, I beg your pardon. It's bundle BB7. Small b,
Yes. And the page?
page 349.
349. Okay, no, that's fine. If previously no.
Oh, sorry, DCJ. Are you referring to the error in the date?
Yes,
I beg your
yes.
pardon. So
Yeah.
that is Mr. van der Westhuizen's affidavit.
Yeah,
At
I've got
exhibit-
it. I just want to
Yes.
refer to make a reference to the bundle where there is the resignation document.
Yes, no, that's what I've given you. That's
Oh, that's what you have given me.
Yes.
Yeah. The page was 349.
correct,
Yes.
Chairperson.
Okay, all right. Your junior could check if no supplementary statement or affidavit was previously made by Mr. van der Westhuizen to correct this. It would be good if we could get a supplementary statement that can be slotted in behind his affidavit.
We will do that, DCJ. So, Mr. Molefe, then at the time that you were dealing with this Neotel T-Systems issue, you accept that Mr. Essa was a director of Broadband Infocom?
I did not know that.
No, but I'm asking you, you accept that he was a director of Broadband Infocom?
Yes, from the information that is here, yes.
All right. Whilst dealing with Mr. Essa, perhaps I can turn to a different topic. And that is, and I suppose importantly, it also still deals with T-Systems. But this is the cession from T-Systems to Zestalor. Now, what the evidence shows is that Transnet appointed T-Systems to manage its IT infrastructure and at least some 2,200 computers from T-Systems. Do you know anything about that?
Chair, I have no recollection of this. Okay.
Could I ask you please to go to exhibit BB3, in brackets little a, Mr. Mohammedi's exhibit.
BB3?
BB3, little a.
What page number?
30.
Yes, Mr. Mybeck.
Page 30, and at the foot of the page, please, Mr. Molefe, paragraph 5.12.2, under the heading T-Systems. Are you there?
Yes.
T-Systems said, Mr. Mohammedi, Transnet appointed T-Systems, I beg your pardon, to manage its IT infrastructure However, there are matters that relate to this contract that I'd like to highlight. Over the page.
Yes.
Transnet Group Capital was paying for approximately 2,200 computers when only approximately 1,100 were employed by the division, etc. Of a particular relevance then is paragraph 5.12.3. The key issue to note is that these computers were all leased through the T-Systems contract, which was subsequently ceded initially to Zestalor and then later to Innovent Rental and Asset Management Solutions. I attach Annexure MSM 40, copy of the cession and delegation agreement between Transnet, Zestalor and T-Systems. Both Zestalor and Innovent are partly owned by Salim Essa, a well-known associate of the Guptas and the majority shareholder of Trillion Capital Partners. Do you know anything about that?
No, sir, I don't know anything about that. When was this?
Let me take you to the agreement because you in fact signed it. The cession from T-Systems to Zestalor.
Yeah.
That you will find in Mr. Mohammedi's next volume, that being Exhibit BB3 in brackets little b.
Exhibit BB3?
B. All right, can I ask you please to go to page 581.
581.
Yeah.
One second, Mr. Maybeck. Yes, Mr. Maybeck.
Thank you. At MSM 581, you find a cession and delegation agreement between Transnet, Zestalor, and T-Systems. Do you see that?
Yes.
And if I can take you to page 585, at paragraph 3.1, under the heading Cession and Delegation, T-Systems hereby cedes its rights under the transferred agreement as indicated in attachment A to Zestalor, who
Yes.
hereby accepts the cession.
Yes.
And if you then go forward all the way to page 5, MSM 592, you will see that you signed that agreement.
Yes. And just for the sake of completeness, this agreement would have been accompanied by a memo requesting me to sign the agreement. I don't know if you have the memo.
I don't have the memo.
Oh,
The point is you signed it.
yes, I signed it.
Now, could I take you please to Exhibit 5?
I wanted to check the date of the agreement, Mr. Maybeck. It's 1 December 2014, is that right?
That appears correct.
Yeah, okay.
So this is also something you dealt with in 2014. Can I take you to Bundle 5, please? And could you turn, please, to page 405.86. Are you there?
Yes.
So that's a TRPC search on Zestalor.
Yes.
And if you could turn forward, please, to page 504.89. And right at the bottom of the page, there's a person by the name of Zinat Osmani. See that?
Zinet?
Osmani.
But on which page?
The foot of page 405.89.
Yes.
You know that person?
No, I don't know.
Well, I just want to put it to you that she is or was at the
sorry.
time.
I'm sorry, Mr. Maybank. Page 405.8.
89.
Oh, so that must be quite far, huh?
Yes.
Okay, I've got it.
So I just want to put to you that Zinat Osmani was Mr.Essa's wife.
Yes.
You know that?
No, I don't even know Mr. Essa, as I said.
Okay, well, we're getting a look. Okay, so that's what I want to put to you. Let's carry on with something else where Mr. Essa features. I want to turn now
I'm
to
sorry. Who was Mr.Essa's wife?
Zinat Osmani.
Or
The
the
person
one
recorded-
at the bottom?
Yes.
Okay, I've seen it, yeah. Okay,
You would have seen, DCJ, that she was a director in the year 2014
of T-Systems.
of
No,
Zestalor.
of Zestalor.
Oh, okay.
So there was a cession from T-Systems to Zestalor.
Yes, okay.
Mr. Molefe signed that contract, and this lady was a director of Zestalor, and she is Mr. Essa's wife.
Okay.
Now, let's move to another topic.
Before, just to put everything in context, well, I accept that I signed the session. That's the reason I wanted to see the memo is I wanted to see the
background and
the
context
background
and the reasons
and the reasons.
and the motivation.
Yes, but what I do know and recall is that typically agreements like that of T-Systems would have a clause, and I say this without having seen the actual agreement that was seeded, or maybe it's attached, would say that this agreement may be seeded, and that when the party that is seeding the agreement wants to seed, Transnet or the other party may not refuse unreasonably for the session to happen. So I would imagine it was in that context. But I think that if this was investigated further, maybe that can be confirmed. But I think sitting here, that was the context.
Okay.
Which is why I wanted to see the memo that preceded. Maybe the memo would have said, we cannot unreasonably refuse to see it. Yeah.
Okay.
And I want to state that I was not, I don't think that I applied my mind to the directors of Zestalor, but I did not know that the person in question was Mr.Essa's wife.
Okay, let's carry on then with another topic also relating to Mr. Essa, and that is the Manganese expansion project. Now, you'll remember, and we touched on this at the beginning, Mr. Henk Bester, who was then employed by Hatch Consulting, gave evidence about this. Do you remember that?
Yes, and when we were talking about Mr. Bester,
Yes.
I think the other day, I think I kept confusing him with the Bester from ESCOM in my head. Actually, I don't recall Mr. Bester nor how he looks like or what he looks like. So I don't actually think
That's that's the one we are talking about
this
now.
one who works
Yeah.
for Hedge.
Okay.
Yes.
I just want to take you to 5 paragraphs of his affidavit. That you find at Transnet Bundle 4, and Mr. Bester is Exhibit BB19.
Yes.
So if I could ask you please to turn to BB19 and turn up page 29. So at paragraph 19, and you would have seen this before, so I'm going to paraphrase it. You'll remember that Mr. Bester's evidence was that Hatch was tendering and that there were people that made advances in relation to being appointed as its supply development partner. And at paragraph 19, he talks about a meeting where Padiachi and Reddy, amongst the people that I've referred to, indicated their respective companies would form a joint venture if they worked with Hatch on phase 1. Padiachi further explained that they, him, Reddy, and their respective companies knew everything about the project and people high up in Transnet. He said, I understood this to mean executives such as the CEO, CFO, and COO. Do you have any comment to that?
No, I have no comment.
Then at paragraph 23, he talks about a meeting. And he says about 5 lines from the bottom, Basson said that they had an earlier discussion with Anoj Singh, Transnet Group Chief Financial Officer at the time, as GCFO. Singh was responsible for signing the confinement for phase 1 prior to Molefe giving final approval as the group chief executive. Would you confirm that?
I can't comment on that.
Well, I think we've seen this contract yesterday, actually. This is the MNPP, or
Yes.
the Manganese contract.
Yes, but I can't comment on what Basson was saying
Sure.
to Padiachi and Reddy.
At paragraph 29, he receives a call from Padiachi, who indicated that he would like to see him again. They had a meeting. Padiachi and Reddy advised that the confinement approval was imminent, but that Hatch needed to sign the addendum to the MOU before confinement could be finalized. He says over the page, it was clear that they were not happy with Hatch's proposed amendments. I understood this to mean either that Singh would not approve the confinement in order for Molefe to give final approval, alternatively both Molefe and Singh would not give the necessary approvals. Do you have any comment on that?
Chair, I have no comment on it, and actually I don't know Mr. Padiachi and Mr. Reddy. I can't recall who they are. I have no idea who they are.
Let's then deal with paragraph 65. Now, this is the meeting that was held at Melrose Arch, JB's Corner, attended by Mr. Essa, 65. Essa further indicated that he can provide me with a submitted tender documentation from all the other bidders. He told me that they have already decided that the new boss of Eskom will be Molefe and that an announcement will be made in the newspapers soon. I've already taken you to that. I assume you have nothing further to say.
Yeah, and we've spoken about this meeting at length. By the way, who else was at this meeting?
It was Mr. Essa and Mr. Bester, and I think there were others.
There were others. Have the others corroborated this evidence?
Sorry?
Have the others corroborated this evidence?
No one else has given evidence about this particular discussion.
Yeah, I can't comment on it,
All right.
but the chairperson was at pains to explain that I should be concerned about it. So it would be interesting if the commission could say that from the people that were there, they can confirm that this is actually a discussion that took place.
This is a thing that doesn't
But
concern
it is
you,
a
Mr.
discussion that took place in my absence that does not worry me, that has got nothing to do with me.
Then at paragraph 71, on 30 November 2014, Molefe signed a letter that awarded the rail tender to, and this is the consortium H2N JV. And then the Port N-Met project was awarded to Flag, consisting of Fleur, Amacom, and Gib. I suspect that the appointment of Flag was due toEssa's involvement. You want to say anything about that?
I can't comment about his suspicion. I can only say that it was not due toEssa's involvement. I think that if I did award such a tender.
You awarded the tender, did you?
Huh?
You awarded that tender.
Yes, if I did, it was on the basis of a recommendation that had been made after due process.
All right, and then if I can take you to the evidence of Deirdre Stradom. She also testified on this issue, and you'll find her affidavit at BB20 in the same file that you're in. So it's bundle 4, BB20.
Yes.
And if you could please turn to paragraph 35 at page 145. And from paragraphs 35 to 38, she effectively corroborates what she was told by Bester. But of particular importance presently is paragraph 35. Since the value of the transaction, and perhaps in fairness to you, I must just indicate to you that Ms. Bester was in charge from Transnet side of the MEP.
Of the NMPP?
Yes, she was at the time, I think it was the program director of the Manganese expansion project.
Mr. Bester?
Sorry?
Did you say Mr. Bester was?
No, Mr. Bester worked for Hatch.
Yes, yes. Oh,
Stradom, Deirdre
yes.
Stradom.
Yes.
All right. So she says at paragraph 35, since the value of the transaction, she's talking about this confinement, was below 250 million, final approval of the confinement resided with Mr. Molefe, the then GCE. Mr. Rudy Besson, TCP GM, told me that the ETC value was reduced to fit in with the GCE's delegated authority, i.e. within Molefe's monetary mandate. This meant that he had the delegated authority to authorize the expenditure without approval required from the Board Acquisitions and Disposal Committee. I annex here to mark DS3, the approval of the confinement of Phase 1 to Hatch, and an approved contract value of 220 million. Delegation of authority that was applicable at the time. You want to comment on that?
I can't comment on the discussion that Rudy Basson had with Deirdre Stradom.
Sorry?
I can't comment on this discussion that Rudy Basson had with Deirdre Stradom on the corridor.
But did you fit this contract in your mandate?
No.
So you can comment.
I did not fit any contract into any delegation.
And then at paragraph 36 over the page, 146, the confinement was structured as a fixed cost contract with specific and very high supplier development targets to be achieved by Hatch. Singh increased the SD targets further during the approval process. I know this because I had to get Garma to sign the approval, and at that stage the ST value was 40%. The final value of ST that was submitted to Molefe for final approval was 50%. This seems high to you or not?
I can't recall this specific transaction like that, but What, is it the 50% that you find offensive?
Yeah, I'm saying, is that high? Does it sound high to you?
I don't know in the context of this transaction. I would have to look at the memo
Yeah.
that was sent to me to approve what I approve. But looking at it like this, it doesn't ring any bells.
All right.
It also doesn't look like there's anything wrong that was happening here.
Well, Mr. Molefe, there was a lot wrong that was happening here.
Huh?
There was a huge amount wrong that was happening here.
Yes, what was it?
Well, there were attempts by skills development partners and Essa to force Hatch to appoint them.
Was Essa forcing Hedge to appoint them?
Well, let's just go back to I've told you about the meeting at the Melrose Arch. I've read to you what happened. And the fact that he referred to you.
Yes, I'm not aware of that.
So when you say I'm just trying to explain to you, do you see this is a very serious thing that was happening here?
No.
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 All right.
No, because I'm not aware of all of these things that were happening.
I'm not suggesting you, we're aware, but do you see how prevalent it seems corruption was within the organization? Because what we've done in the last half an hour, how many times have we seen reference to Mr. Essa?
Yes, I've noticed that.
Yeah, it's really a lot of times.
Yes.
So when T-Systems is contracting with a party that Mr. Essa is a director to, you are ceding a contract where Mr.Essa's wife is a director. You are referred to here by Mr. Essa as being the next CEO of Eskom in the context of skills supply development partners being foisted on Hatch. And we know that it's certainly from the money flows evidence, it's through supply development partners that so much of this money laundering happened.
Yes, those are your findings or observations that you are making, and I choose not to comment on them.
Well, it seems it's what the evidence points to. It's not my findings. I fortunately don't need to make any
Yes,
findings.
that is what you're observing, that the evidence is pointing.
But it's troubling, isn't it? It must be to you.
Well, it would be troubling if I knew that I had done something wrong. So, this was happening in the background. I was not aware of it. And if these people have anything to answer to, let them answer to it. All I'm pointing out is that I was not aware of this.
Yes, but what I'm trying to get at is even now, when you see this, is it not troubling to you?
It would trouble me if my conscience
Oh,
knew that I had done something wrong.
Well, Mr. Molefe,
I think we've traversed this, Chairperson.
we have, and maybe one should take what you have said before and say you would say the same thing, but one wants to be sure. I would expect that assuming that the evidence that Mr. Mybeck is talking about were to be true, it is what was happening, it would mean that in the organization where you were the group chief executive officer, there was a lot of corruption and money laundering that may have been perpetrated by certain people. And assume for present purposes that you were innocent and you didn't know. But just hearing about it to say, is this what was happening while I was there? I would expect that it would be of concern to you. Not to say necessarily that you had anything to do with it. Just the fact that it may have been happening, or if the evidence is true, it was happening, taxpayers' money, people were using all kinds of vehicles to get money illegally.
Well, Chairperson, then if it was indeed happening, I'm concerned.
Yes, okay.
all right. And then to another topic, the new age. I think you've accepted that under your watch.
So this file can can go
Yes,
for
it can
for the time
go
being.
back. Thank you, Chairperson. Mr. Molefe, I think that under your watch, Transnet sponsored the big interview in the New Age.
Yes,
And you did that for a number of years.
yes,
And I see that in 2016, the cost of that advertising was 450,000 rands per month.
Should I have any bundle in front of me?
Well, the difficulty, DCJ, is that this,
Or you will
yes.
mention when I need to have one?
yes,
Okay, all right.
the difficulty with this and the exhibit is that this comes from another stream. It's MM.
That's fine. Well, it may well be, you
you have
will
it?
assess if
Oh, sorry.
I need to have a file
Yes,
in
certainly.
front of me.
All right, we do have, your registrar has it. But I want to try and short circuit all of this. Mr. Jackson,
Yeah,
and you've been
okay.
referred to this.
yeah, but you said in 2016.
Well, attached, I've been looking through the invoices and I see that in 2016, it was 450,000 per month.
Yes, but in 2016 I wasn't the Transnet.
Yes, okay, fair enough, I accept that. What Mr. Jackson says, and you've been asked about this and you've been asked to comment on it, is that he thought that this was not at all valuable or really in the interests of Transnet. Do you want to comment on that?
I have in my affidavit, Chairperson, pointed to Mr. Jackson's evidence that when I arrived at Transnet, we were actually advertising in the mainstream media, paying a lot of money on the rail crossing campaign. And this was to alert people to the dangers of rail crossing. It was a noble campaign. But the way that it was done is that there were very gruesome pictures that were printed and even played on TV of trains hitting cars. I felt that this is not, and we were paying for that as advertising. I don't know if maybe the investigating team has cared to quantify how much we paid for that, for those advertisements in the mainstream media. And what I said to the branding team was that this is not good for the brand to be seen, for our trains to be seen to be smashing cars. This is what remains in people's minds. I even said that, when children associate our trains with the collisions with minibus taxis, that is what will stay in their mind, and they may not want to work for Transnet when they grow up. So we have to find another positive way of doing it. And I also said we must desist from advertising where we pay for a message because people read through it. So if we say we are the most effective and efficient transportation company in Africa, and we've paid to say that, it's not as effective as the same message being in the news. In the news, so as part of the main news. So we have to move from paying for adverts, and move our brand into the mainstream news. Find a way of moving our brand into the mainstream news. And the big interview was an opportunity to do that. Even though the people, when we sponsored the big interview, the people that spoke at the big interview spoke about news, about topical issues, and not Transnet is an effective and efficient organization. So now we were building partners here with people that were speaking at the big interview to support our messaging later, but also, whenever possible, putting in our newsworthy our newsworthy issues onto the news through the big interview. And this is the shift that I asked should be done from a branding point of view. We should be seen in the news and not in the advertising pages from a branding point of view. So this is a discussion that I had. Mr. Jackson, I think, was present and he agreed. And we agreed that on this philosophical or doctrinal issue, this is how we're going to move forward. And that was the reason for supporting the big interview.
Well, maybe we'll talk more later on the matter. You may or may not know that when some of the Transnet witnesses who talked on this issue came to give evidence, I had lots of issues, questions to them. I would have thought that if the best way to promote your brand is to be in the news, is to do things that are newsworthy, and you are therefore in the news for good things.
Yes.
Yes, as opposed to what you have just mentioned, which was mentioned by those witnesses too, that in these breakfast shows, very often the speakers would not be speaking about Transnet. They would be talking about whatever had been planned to be talked about. And it didn't seem to me that the idea that it was promoting Transnet's brand was as clear as it might be to you.
Yes, Chairperson. And the idea, it was actually very subtle because these people were newsmakers. And what we were implanting in them is a positive view of Transnet. We were engaged in the MDS. At the same time, we were a lot in the news about the MDS. But the idea was that whenever, for example, we have a project that comes onto the news, these newsmakers would then help and to promote the positive news on the other things that we were doing. I don't know if you understand what I mean. So there would be a friendly force.
Well, as you speak, the point that comes to my mind is that if you have done something that's newsworthy,
yes,
the media houses won't even pay because that's newsworthy.
Yes,
they will want it, and you will be talked about in favorable terms without you paying.
Yes.
You know.
Yes.
So it seems to me that if you or Transnet engaged in activities that were seen as good by the community and as newsworthy,
yes,
that's when you would you would promote your brand, and you would do so without paying.
So, Chairperson, let's, for example, take that we sponsor a news, this program, and the person that is being interviewed is the Premier of Mpumalanga. And she's going to talk about her successes as the Premier of Mpumalanga. So that's fine. She talks about her successes as the Premier of Mpumalanga. But we operate in Mpumalanga. The day that we have a newsworthy item and she gets an opportunity to be interviewed about a matter that involves Transnet, we can be sure that she will go out of her way to make sure that she portrays us in a very good light. That was the whole point.
Well, I'll let Mr. Maibek take it from there, but if you have done something that is seen as good by the community or by the society, the news people will be there. You won't need somebody else.
Which news people, Chairperson?
The media. They
These
will be
ones?
there. Yes.
I know, Chairperson. We live in two different countries.
Well, maybe Transnet was not doing those things that it should have done.
We were executing the market demand strategy. We were announcing all sorts of good news every week. Government was, generally, the problem in government is that despite the overwhelming negative publicity, there are a lot of things that are good that government has done, that have not made it into the news. The attitude of our media is that if somebody has not died, if there is no scandal involved, they're not interested. And so this was, I mean, you can talk to all the communicators from government. This was a big problem from the 90s right through the 2000s. And even up to now, I can say that our media finds it difficult to portray our government in a positive light. That is, there are very few people who would argue against that kind of statement. It is, and I experienced it in my entire career, that we had done spectacular good things that the media was not interested in.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I'll mention one example of my own experience. I think about 2 years ago, I went to the area, to the village where I grew up.
Yes.
And went to the school, primary school that I attended.
Yes.
Because the Zondo and Bucks Educational Trust that was established a few years ago,
yes,
had spoken to another trust,
yes,
about the situation in the school which I attended, yes, of toilets and so on.
Yes.
And that trust organized funding and they sorted that out, and we went there to have a function,
yes,
and to say this is what has been done. And I think somebody must have told this in the media, and some journalists went to that rural area, and they were there, and the story was in a number of newspapers about the toilets that had been built for that school, and a school hall in the high school in the area. We didn't pay anything to the media for them to put us in the newspapers. But
yeah,
I'm just mentioning, I think it might be a matter of degree. I'm just mentioning one example. Mr. Mybeck?
Yes, thank you.
Well, I was going to give another example that involves you, but we'll leave it.
Okay. Okay.
So, Mr. Molefe, I'm just going to read to you. I don't think you have this exhibit before you, but this is just one paragraph. It's exhibit MM5 at page 10, paragraph 47. Mr. Jackson says this.
Page
10, JFJ 10.
Okay.
Mr. Jackson says this. My own view was that the decision to participate in the big interview was not justifiable, given that TNA was a new publication with no readership or circulation data and a completely unknown demographic reach. This meant that it was impossible to evaluate the newspaper's reach insofar as our stakeholders are concerned, and constituted a significant risk considering the amount of money involved. Do you want to comment on that?
Does he indicate that he raised this during our debates? Because my recollection is that when we had this debate about the repositioning of the brand advertising, he agreed. As I say in my memo, maybe it was just because to buy my face, as he's trying to buy the face of his new bosses now. It's just a reflection of the person that he is. But I can't recall that he raised that issue either in a memo or in a debate on this matter.
I'd like to move to another topic, please. Chairperson, you can dispense with that file, and if you could now be provided with Transnet Bundle 1, Exhibit BB15. And I would like now to address briefly the topic of Mr. Garma's legal fees.
Yes.
And I would like to start, I think I'm going to refer you only to two documents. Can you please go to BB15? You should have a tab 2.
EB15 2.
And I see it's consecutively numbered. So perhaps you can go directly to page 142. You'll see at 142, there's a memorandum to you
Yes.
from Mr. Mapoma, General
Yes.
Manager, Group Legal Services.
Yes.
And it deals with legal fees, Mr. Garma versus Transnet.
Yes.
Let me direct your attention to paragraph 4.
Yes.
You referred to a settlement, and it says the relevant clause of the settlement agreement is clause 3.5, which provides that Transnet will make a contribution equivalent to 75% of Mr. Garma's tax costs incurred during his High Court application and in respect of his unfair dismissal dispute referred to the bargaining council.
Yes.
You see that?
Yes.
So 75% of the costs in his High Court application and 75% of his costs in the unfair dismissal dispute referred to the bargaining council.
Yes.
Now, if you can skip to paragraph 7 at page 143, or in fact, let's go to 6. Mr. Garma incurred legal costs in 2 matters. You would have seen that from the settlement agreement as well. The first is his application in the High Court, in which Transnet used 2 sets of attorneys, Bowman Gilfillan. It says Denise rates, but that should actually, I think, be Eversheds. The second matter in which he incurred costs...
It should say Evershed.
I think it should say Eversheds, yes. The second matter in which he incurred costs is the labour matter. And then it says the costs in the High Court were granted in Transnet's favour by the court. Do you see that? So you won that case.
Yes.
These costs were supposed to have been paid by Mr. Garma. You see that?
Yes.
On reaching settlement with Mr. Garma, Transnet sought and obtained the taxed bills from these 2 firms of attorneys and paid 75% of the total amounts.
Yes.
Does that make any sense to you? So you win, he owes you costs. What you'll end up paying him are your costs.
Come again?
You win with costs.
No, I wasn't there.
But this memo was sent to you. I'm trying to...
Yes, this memo was sent to me, and all I did was to note it.
Okay.
Yes.
You just noted it.
I just noted it. So there must have been a request from me to say, please appraise me of the Gamma matter.
But when you note, I mean, this is really, perhaps I misunderstand things. You noted it, whether you approved it or not. Did you read the nonsense in paragraph 7?
Well, I read it, but I can't comment on it even now.
But Mr. Molefe, just let's have a look at what it says. The costs in the High Court were granted in your favour.
Yeah.
These costs were supposed to be paid by Mr. Garma, your costs.
Yeah.
On reaching settlement with Garma, Transnet sought and obtained tax bills from these 2 firms of attorneys, your attorneys,
Yes.
and then paid to Mr. Garma their fees.
Yes.
So the question really, Mr. Molefe, is you may or may not have approved, but you noted and you read. Did you
Yes,
pick up this very absurd idea?
Yes, and so I requested, I must have requested, I think there was a query from the Director General about this matter that I knew very little about. And I asked to be appraised, and this is the memo that was sent to me. And then I read it, but it is a matter that was handled by the board. It was above me. It was handled by the board. And I read this memorandum, and these were facts that were being presented to me I don't know if there was expectation that I should do anything about it or challenge it or say I don't approve, but it was done at the board. And this was a memo from Mr. Mapoma, who's a general manager, Group Legal Services. And he was talking about text costs and 75% and so on. I can't say that I even really understood what he was saying. I just noted that, well, yeah, there was an agreement that the cost would be settled in a particular way.
So if you were asked to approve this, would you have looked at it more carefully? Is that what you're saying or not?
No, I can't speculate on what I would have done if this had come to me for approval. Perhaps I would have sought more clarity.
Well, let's have a look at page 104.
104.
Yes. Because earlier in the year, you had in fact approved this.
Earlier.
104. So this memo is dated that I took you to at 142. It's dated 17 August 2011. Let me take you to the memo at 104. This is now 23 March 2011.
Yes.
You see it refers there at the bottom of the page, the same 3.5 of the settlement agreement.
Yes.
And then it says financial implications over the page. 75% of the attached invoices have been paid to Mr. Garma. And then those attached invoices are invoices you see over the page. Evershed's attorneys
Yes.
and Bowman Gilfillan attorney.
Yes.
And that you approved.
Yes. Because, as you see in paragraph 2 of the memo,
Yeah.
So this is an agreement that the board had entered into and had agreed to pay. And my approval really was as a functionary to effect the payment of a board agreement, basically.
But I'm not sure that does it, in other words, if something's put before you for approval, you can just sign it.
Well, if the board has entered into an agreement
Yeah.
that a certain payment will be made, and I do not see why I would be standing in the way of the payment being made.
But the thing is, the board hadn't entered into that agreement.
The board hadn't.
No, because have a look at,
The settlement negotiations were sanctioned by the Transnet board
but-
and the chairman of the board,
Correct.
Mr. Mafika Mkonazi, was
Mr.
mandated to conclude such negotiations.
correct, Mr. Molefe, but the point is if you go to 3.5, the clause, Transnet will make a contribution equivalent to 75% of Mr. Garma's tax costs incurred in the High Court and in the labour matter. What this memorandum lands up doing is authorising Mr. Garma to receive your costs.
Yes, but this was in terms of the agreement.
No, it wasn't. The terms of the agreement is that he would get his costs. That's what I'm taxing you about. You've been asked.
Let me explain it, Mr. Molefe. Mr. Gama, I think when he was suspended,
Yes,
brought an urgent application in the High Court
yes.
against Transnet and
When
various...
he was suspended.
When he was suspended.
Yes.
Against Transnet as an entity, as well as a number of members of the board, maybe all of them, I'm not sure, but
Yeah.
a number of them,
Yes.
to effectively get the suspension set aside. Transnet and various board members opposed that application,
Yes.
and the High Court dismissed his application
Yes.
and said he must pay Transnet's costs as well as the costs of those members of the board who had opposed the application.
Yes.
Okay, that's what the court ordered.
Yes.
Now, Transnet and the board members had gone to lawyers and briefed lawyers to oppose this application. So Transnet had incurred costs.
Yes.
So the order of the court, as far as the costs were concerned, was to the effect that Mr. Gama must pay Transnet and the board members their legal costs. Now, what ultimately happened, which is what Mr. Mybeck is talking about, is that Transnet, the settlement agreement said that Mr. Transnet must pay, I think, 75% of Mr. Gama's legal costs.
That's what the settlement agreement said.
That's what the settlement agreement said.
Yes.
Even though he had lost in the High Court.
So that was the settlement agreement that was entered into
Yes.
with Mr. Manganese.
Yes. But leave aside whatever you may think of that part of the settlement agreement.
Yes.
What the memorandum, what was ultimately done, was not to look at 75% of Mr. Gama's legal costs,
Yes.
but to take at the legal costs of Transnet
Yes.
and say what is 75% of the cost that Transnet and its board members have incurred in this litigation. And then say, we will pay Mr. Gama 75% of our legal costs. So that's what he's talking about, to say that's something very, very strange.
Yeah, Chairperson, to be honest with you, my understanding of this matter was that Mr. Gama had been dismissed and that the matter went to court, and now we have entered, or the board or Mr. Manganese has entered into an agreement to pay his costs. They entered into an agreement to pay his costs, and that this was the payment in line with that agreement. I would expect that if there was anything untoward, the legal people would have picked it up, because in fact this recommendation came from the legal department that we should make a payment in this fashion. Mr. Mapoma was a general manager, legal services, compiled the memorandum, and it was recommended by the head of legal at Transnet, Ms. Zola Stephens. I took it that it was a payment in line with what has been agreed to. I must confess that I did not go into the intricacies of how this. In any case, this thing of the legal cost is something that I'm yet to understand, because you know people talk about tax costs, but it doesn't involve SARS, and so yeah, this tax cost thing is not something that I'm competent in.
No, the tax cost part, I can understand from a layperson's point of view when you say tax cost, where is SARS here?
Yeah.
But of course, obviously, I think if you are required to approve anything and there's something you don't understand, you need to ask, because you don't want to approve something that's wrong.
Yes, but also when it comes from the head of legal and the general manager legal services, and they refer to an agreement that was entered into even before my time. Yeah, the case numbers are quoted there.
Yeah, okay. Mr.
If you look at the recommendation, Chair, it says, based on the motivation above, I recommend that the contribution to the legal fees must be paid as per the settlement agreement. For me, there was nothing to argue, if indeed it was as per the settlement agreement.
Mr. Mybeck.
Yes, thank you. Let's turn to another topic, please, and that is Abalosi. Could I ask you to go to Transnet Bundle 3 and to exhibit BB 17. All right, now, could you please turn to page 499?
You say 499?
Yes,
Okay.
Chairperson, 499.
Okay. I hope I didn't misrepresent anything, Mr. Maibek, about what happened with regard to those costs to Mr. Molefe.
That is, I understand it. Look, I understand that Mr. Gama,
Yeah.
I checked with my junior. We don't, in his affidavits, he's dealt with costs, but he doesn't seem to have said much. So
Yeah.
I understand that he may have a version that he will give, and that might change things. But
Yeah, I think
as the evidence stands now,
Yeah.
it's correctly so.
I think I saw that in his affidavit. He said high costs and costs in regard to the labor matter. That's how he puts it.
Yeah.
But I just saw in the settlement agreement or the quoted paragraph in the memo that you referred us
Yeah.
to, it doesn't say labor matter.
No.
It says it's specific, the matter, unfair dismissal matter.
Yes,
So
the
that
referral to the bargaining council.
Yes, yeah,
Yes.
yeah. Okay, all right.
But it would be interesting to find out what Ms. Stephens and Mr. Mapoma also say.
Well, he has given evidence, and yeah, but certainly there is evidence, and if you would like to have a look at it, it would be available in the transcript.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, Mr. Molefe, can we turn to page 499? Are you there?
Yes.
So we're dealing now with Abalosi, and you would have seen these paragraphs. Mr. Tadu was instructed by Bowman Gilfillan and was one of the attorneys dealing with the matter. And you know, up to this point, litigation had been entered into. Transnet had sued Abalosi. He says that I was subsequently invited together with one of my partners and counsel to attend a meeting with the group CEO, Mr. Molefe. I prepared a note in anticipation of the meeting, which briefly summarized the key message that I intended to communicate to Mr. Molefe. Then he goes on to say at 43, the meeting with Mr. Molefe duly took place. Mr. Molefe informed us that the litigation was sensitive and that he had been receiving calls from a person he did not identify by name, but I assume from the context was General Nyanda, asking why Transnet was persisting with the litigation against Abalosi. Do you want to comment on that?
I can't recall that I said in the meeting that I have been receiving calls from anyone. I can't recall that.
All right. And then at 45, shortly before this meeting, it appears that Mr. Selinga had addressed a memorandum to Mr. Molefe in which he motivated for and recommended the rescission of the decision that had previously been made to exclude GNS/Abalosi from doing further business with Transnet, effectively a blacklisting. Is that correct?
That is correct, Chair. And if I can explain this, I was informed that Abalosi had been blacklisted. And then I asked what process was followed to blacklist them. And no process had been followed at all. And I do know that before anyone is blacklisted, there has to be a process, and the person has to be heard, and everything must be recorded. It's even in the Treasury instructions, but also, I mean, dealing with Mr. Selinga and the legal department, I mean, they should have known that it's a requirement that people have to be heard before you blacklist them. So I said that if that blacklisting is challenged, we will not win. So we must rescind it immediately because it is illegal. And so that is how that memo came about.
Because they hadn't been afforded a fair procedure.
Yes.
So why didn't you just give them one?
Well, The blacklisting had happened sometime before I arrived.
That I understand, but did you ever inquire into why they were blacklisted?
Yes,
And what did you discover?
because they said that they had done work. They claimed to have done work, which they had not done. They said, so it was like a contract, I think it was a guarding contract, and it was about providing personnel for the guarding of, I think it was trains. And that Transnet was saying they did not do the work. However, our head of security at the time, Major General retired Toka, Baduza, Dumezweni Baduza, had come to me and said to me, this story that Abalosi has not done work is not true. Abalosi has copies of the work, proof of the work that they have done. And somebody here at TFR is hiding that so that they do not get paid. And so it appeared that Abalosi was not being treated fairly. In my affidavit, I do say that, I do talk about this story and say that subsequent to informing me about this, General Toka brought the information to me. And I took the information to Transnet's risk committee, as well as, I can't remember which other committee, 2 committees of Transnet. And the decision there was, then we should settle this matter. And I was given a mandate to go and settle this matter out of court, because it would be embarrassing that we have actually been hiding proof that Abalosi had done work.
Did you actually establish that there was proof that Abalosi had done work?
General Tuka brought it to me, and he said to me he interviewed people at Transnet that had knowledge that the work had been done, and that there are certain people that are hiding that evidence from Transnet, from the management at Transnet. He investigated the matter and brought the proof to me.
Now, so did he bring you statements by people who claimed to have witnessed Abalosi perform the work? What actually did he bring to you?
It was files of timesheets, if I recall well.
Yes,
Timesheets that were signed.
but timesheet can be made without somebody working.
Well, he said that that was proof, and that there are people at Transnet, he mentioned by name, the people that were prepared to make a statement to say that the work has in fact been done.
Yeah. Did you
But
get
from
such
what was
statements?
presented at the time, I was convinced that it was indeed true that Transnet had done the work.
But did you ask that statements be obtained from people who were prepared to put their
Affidavits.
signatures to say, we did see Abalosi perform work there, and there, that day and that day? Did you get that? Because then it would mean certain people were prepared to stand up and give evidence to say, yes. Did you get that?
No, I did not ask for the statements to be obtained from the people.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Part of the problem may have been that these were people that General Toga considered to be sources. General Toga's background was crime intelligence. He had come from crime intelligence. So, perhaps, maybe you should have advised that we
Yes,
should
because
get
you don't
statement
need
from
crime
them.
intelligence for this. If Abalosi's work,
Yes.
for example, was that they must send security officers or certain people to be in certain gardens
Yes.
during certain times, or to guard Transnet's buildings in certain places, or whatever the work was,
Yes.
then there ought to be people who were employed by Transnet, who were supposed to sign whenever there was somebody, the guard, was
Yeah,
there,
that-
and so on.
That is the files that were brought to say that this is proof of work done.
Yes, but the question is, do you know whether what you were provided with
Was not fraudulent.
well, let's leave out the fraud. Yeah, maybe it may be fraudulent. Did it contain documents where people who had witnessed Abalosi doing what they were contractually obliged to do? In other words, there were signatures by people who say, yes.
Yes.
There were
Yes, that
such
was the nature
documents.
of the evidence.
Yes.
What I was thinking you're asking is, did they make the statement?
Yes, yeah.
They did not make
Statements.
statements.
But what
But
did
these
you
were,
have?
these were, as I say, timesheets, like,
Yeah.
these people were here and they signed, these people were
Yes.
here and they signed.
But did you
Now-
only rely on the general in terms of those people who had signed, or did
There
you
was,
send some investigation?
there were 2 or 3 people inside TFR that had this information. And then there were 2 or 3 people that knew that this information had copies and gave it to general. Yeah. What we didn't understand was, why was this being suppressed? Why didn't this come out into the open?
Did you authorize somebody to investigate who was hiding the information from Transnet?
General did. I can't
Yeah.
recall that he ever wrote a report on that, but General did. And
Were those people
I do recall,
confronted?
I do recall saying that this is a matter that may require disciplinary action if it was indeed a Transnet employee that was hiding the information. But people who were at TFR would be able to confirm that this was indeed happening.
Mr. Maibek?
Yes, thank you. Mr. Molefe, you know that subsequently Transnet appointed a firm of attorneys, HNR, to investigate this matter.
This Abalosi matter.
Yes, in other words, to investigate whether that it's their report that gave rise to the withdrawal of the litigation.
Yes.
People refer to it often just simply as the Newpin report.
Yes.
You familiar with that?
They are
You
familiar with?
familiar with the report?
Yes.
Yes. And do you know whether in that report there's any reference to timesheets and this information and evidence that you're
No,
telling
that report was compiled as if that information did not exist.
Can you explain why that would be?
I don't know. As I say, it would appear that somebody had been hiding that information, even from this investigation.
These are people that you appointed, and they produced a report.
No, that were appointed before my time.
Newpin was appointed, and he gave a report to the risk committee. The risk committee accepted the
Yes.
report, and the litigation was withdrawn.
Yes.
Do you know whether there's any reference in the Newpin report to this stock of information?
No, I
that
can't
you-
recall that there is.
And
I
if
can't
there's
rec- I
no
can't recall.
reference in it, well then, it
No,
seems
I
it's
can't
quite
recall that
questionable. whether-
Newpen had reference to these timesheets. I can't also recall that he had the information that we had.
And if he didn't, can you explain why?
I
I mean, he
wouldn't-
interviewed people at Transnet.
Yes,
He conducted a thorough investigation.
yeah.
And do you know what his key conclusion was?
No,
You don't?
I don't remember what his key conclusion
Well,
was.
the conclusion was really that bodies hadn't been provided. People hadn't worked, but value had been added or things saved.
Bodies had been,
Bodies had not been provided, warm bodies,
yes,
but that savings had been effected through certain initiatives.
yes, by Abalosi,
Yes.
yes.
Do you see the tension? You say you're sitting on a stock of information that proved in your mind that people had worked and bodies had been provided.
Well, the information that we had was the work had been done and that the people that were supposed to be provided to do the work had been provided.
By way of timesheets, you saw there were people working.
Yeah, the nature of the
All right.
information, yeah, okay, timesheets and reports and so on.
All right, Mr. Molefe, one would, I suppose, have to study the report and then reflect back on your evidence. But let me get to another point. Had you been speaking?
But the fact of the matter is that the information that was brought to us went to the risk committee. Perhaps it may be worthwhile to look at the minutes of the risk committee where this information was presented. That I remember very clearly. The general brought the information, and what I did with it was to go to the board and say that, look, here is this information that we now have on this matter.
So you confirm you were in touch with the general during this time?
General reported to me.
Yeah,
He
that
was
was
working
not,
for
not
Transnet.
General Nyanda, it's another general.
No, not
The
General Nyanda.
Transnet General.
Okay, I beg your pardon.
Yeah, General Toka. Dumezweni Baduza.
Had you been speaking at all to General Nyanda?
Yes, I know General Nyanda, and we may have been speaking on other matters, even sometimes playing golf. Yes,
He's a friend of yours.
he's a friend of mine, yes.
Because we know that Mr. Garma, I think, also played golf with him. He was obviously an avid golfer, the general.
Did he say he played golf with the general? Did he say how it went?
Is this
Mr.
the
Molefe, do you want to find out whether you do better than him against the general?
Yes, well, to put it in context, General Nyanda has, or maybe used to have before COVID, an annual golf day in Swaziland. Really to raise funds for people that had, in Swaziland, that had supported the ANC and Umkhonto weSizwe in the underground in Swaziland. So every year, I also used to play in that golf challenge. And yeah, at least when we went to Swaziland, I did see him, we did talk, but even in between, we would meet and talk. So yes, I know him.
So I'd like then to just move forward and wrap up on this. So the risk committee, ultimately, on the basis of the Newpin report, took a decision that the litigation should be withdrawn.
Yes.
And what we then know is that you signed the settlement agreement.
Yes, and the agreement was that both parties are not proceeding with the litigation,
Yes.
and that both parties would further negotiate a settlement amount.
So can I just take you, please, to the deed of settlement? That's at page 789
789.
of the same bundle. Bundle 3, BB 16.
Page 89.
789. Are you there?
Yes.
Are you
789.
Yes, you'll see that between the tram lines is deed of settlement. Are you there?
Yes.
So it talks about whereas Transnet issued summons, etc. Under that, whereas Abalosi issued a counterclaim.
Yes.
Now
Well,
we
Mr. Mybeck, I know that we are trying to save time, but I think this document
Certainly.
is quite important. I would suggest, because it's not long,
I'll
just
read it into the
read
record.
it,
Thank you.
into the
I'm
record,
indebted
yeah.
to you.
Yeah.
So it says, whereas Transnet, SOC, Ltd in brackets, Transnet,
Yes.
issued a summons against Abalosi Risk Advisory Services, Pty Limited, Abalosi,
Yes.
previously known as General Nyanda Security Risk Advisory Services, Pty Limited, GNS,
Yes.
in connection with security services rendered to Transnet by GNS in the period 2007 to 2009, the service, and whereas Abalosi issued a counterclaim against Transnet in connection with the services,
Yes.
now wherefore Transnet and Abalosi have agreed to settle all disputes between them in this litigation on the following terms. 1, Transnet hereby withdraws its action against Abalosi. 2, Abalosi hereby withdraws its counterclaim against Transnet. 3, Transnet will, upon signature hereof, issue a media statement in the form as agreed and attached hereto marked A. 4, Transnet will pay all the legal costs incurred by Abalosi, its directors, and the co-founders and directors of GNS on an attorney and own client scale. And 5, the terms of the settlement agreement are confidential and shall not be disclosed by any one of the parties to any third party. Are you there?
Yes,
So this was a settlement of all disputes between the parties
yes.
in this litigation,
In this,
claim and counterclaim.
yes, without going into the amounts.
Yes, well, the only amounts that's referred to is the costs.
Yes,
So that had to be computed, the costs.
yes,
Have you any idea, and you negotiated this agreement,
yes.
why did you agree that Transnet, well, firstly of all, why did you agree that Transnet should pay any costs? Transnet had sued Abalosi, Abalosi had sued Transnet, both parties were calling it a truce. Why should Transnet pick up the tab?
The advice that we got from, which is why I would have said, even this agreement must have been preceded by a memo.
You said you negotiated this agreement. You
Yes,
just
but
said
there was
that.
a memo.
You negotiated.
I negotiated.
Yes.
Yeah.
So then I'm asking you, why did you decide that Transnet should pick up the tab?
Because we were at fault, because we had hidden information. Our people had hidden the information that Abalosi had done the work.
But Mr. Molefe, that wasn't the finding of the Newpen report.
Well, that may not have been the finding of the Newpen report, but this is what I knew for a fact.
Did you, in the negotiations, did you offer to General Nyanda that Transnet would pay the cost, or did he demand that Transnet
General
would pay
Nyanda
the cost?
had that information.
Yes,
And this is what was going to come out in the course
Yes.
of the litigation.
yes.
And General Nyanda's position was, you guys blacklisted me illegally without going through a process. Because of because of information that you had hidden. We as Abalosi have not done anything wrong. It is you who hid away our reports. And therefore, I feel that we were wrong. And unfortunately, I had no leg to stand on.
Mr. Maybeck, let me leave it to you to continue.
Yes, thank you. And then why costs incurred by Abalosi, its directors and co-founders and directors of GNS? Why? I mean, were the co-founders, were they even party to this litigation? And the directors of GNS?
Yes.
Why would you
Well,
pay them?
Chairperson, that is what was represented to me as the damage that would have been done by the fact that we had been hiding information.
But, Mr. Molefe, the business dealings were between Abalosi and Transnet.
Yes,
They were not between Abalosi and the directors, co-founders of GNS and all of that.
yes,
Yes.
yes.
So why would you owe the directors anything on top of owing? Let's assume that Transnet owed something arising out of this. Why would you owe the directors and co-founders of GNS on top of owing Abalosi as an entity?
Chairperson, I mean, this is what I understood to have been the damage that we had done by hiding the information. However,
damage? What
having
damage?
said that, it would have been helpful if I would have seen the memo that preceded our signing this agreement. Typically, there would have been a memo that explains everything that is in the agreement and why we're doing what we're doing.
But the directors and the co-founders had not sued Transnet.
Yeah,
Only Abalosi had
I don't
sued.
have a recollection of why that clause was included as it is, as it
Yeah.
was. I
Because
don't have a
if-
recollection as to the background to that clause. Now, as I sit here, perhaps if I go and reflect on it, I may remember the reason why. But what I can think of as I'm sitting here was because we were in the wrong. We had hidden away information and caused a lot of damage to the company.
What kind of damage did you cause?
Reputational, they had been blacklisted. It had been known that they have been blacklisted.
Did you publish the blacklisting?
No, the matter was in court. It was in the courts. It was public. It was in the court.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did they sue you for it?
They did.
Yes.
This is a settlement.
Okay.
Of,
That's the counterclaim. Was that the
yes.
counterclaim?
Yes.
Okay. But certainly, as you sit here, I mean,
Yes.
I hope you don't say I'm patronizing you.
Must be careful.
Because I didn't say anything, but there was a time when you accused Mr. Maybeck of patronizing you, and I thought it wasn't. When you occupy a certain position,
Yes.
you know, Group CEO of Transnet,
Yes.
you must be taken to have certain knowledge and so on and so on. So there are certain things that we can take it that you can't not know certain things.
Yes.
So my reaction when I saw this for the first time, and I can indicate that I became aware of it after we had been looking at the settlement of Mr. Gama, between Mr. Gama and
Yes.
and the Transnet. This looked very strange.
Yes.
And to me, when I think of you having been CEO of PIC, being CEO of Group CEO of Transnet, I would expect that in litigation that is such as this, even though you might not be a lawyer, but your general knowledge and experience would tell you. But
Yes.
really, if we settle and pay costs, if we are supposed to pay any costs to the entity,
Yes.
that should be enough.
Yes.
You know, we shouldn't be paying the directors and co-founders and all of that.
Yes. Yeah.
Am
Chairperson-
I unfair to expect that kind of knowledge?
Okay, but let me take you through my decision-making process, as I recall it.
Yeah.
The counterclaim was about 95 million. Sitting there negotiating and finally coming to this agreement. Even with this clause, my quick calculation was we were not going to get anywhere near 95 million. And that if the matter proceeded to court and they were suing us for 95 million, which they said was their damages, I saw that we had no leg to stand on. We had hidden the information. So my calculation was, it doesn't matter because it won't be anywhere near 95 million.
Did you bother to say, let us get a legal opinion as to whether this claim of theirs has got any merits? And if so,
No.
how close, what risk do we have
No,
of paying even half of 95 million?
Their claim had merits because we had hidden the information. I was ashamed at what Transnet employees had done.
Well, you're not answering my question, Mr. Molefe. You may have thought it had merit, but you are not a lawyer. I'm
Yes.
asking you whether you bothered to ask for a legal opinion, people who could say to you, in law, yes, there is a claim, and two, it has got reasonable prospects, and if they succeed, will they come close to 95 million?
Yes, which is why I was asking for the memo. Because
Yes.
my recollection was that this was in fact drafted by us, by Transnet's legal department.
Yes, so are you saying that your recollection is that there was a legal opinion
No,
from
not,
within the...
not a legal opinion,
Yes.
but from our side.
Yes.
I was not alone in a smoke-filled bar. We were at Transnet, and I sat with the legal department of Transnet. And as far as I recall, there would have been a memo saying that here is a matter, and we recommend that we settle in this manner. And this document itself was drafted at Transnet by our legal department.
Mr.
So
Michael.
perhaps in the process of drafting, if they had seen that this was untoward or not possible or unreasonable, perhaps they should have advised and said, this doesn't get done. But from a global view, which is where I was that, well, from 95 million to paying costs, it looks like a good deal.
Mr. Mybeck.
Yes, okay. So from 95 million, thank you, Chairperson, to paying costs looks like a good deal. Fine. When you negotiated this settlement, did you negotiate it with General Nyanda?
Yes, General Nyanda was there.
I see.
Yes.
So let's have a look at what happened after that. If you go to page 807, you were written a letter, your reference,
What page?
807, Chairperson.
Okay.
You've written a letter by Abalosi. You see
Yes.
that, dear Brian? And if you go to paragraph 8, at 808, it says they propose 40 million. The 40 million proposal of settlement was believed to be fair restitution and compensation, inclusive of legal costs incurred in this matter,
Yes.
given the extra information required by Transnet in response, and the detail of lost revenue provided in this communication, we think that a settlement of 60 million would be justified. It would be prudent to have this matter concluded. So what they were asking for, you see here, is costs. They were asking for compensation for lost revenue, etc. Do you see all of that? At paragraph 8.
807.
808, paragraph 8. Paragraph 8. Are you sure you're in the right file, Mr.
I don't know if
Molefe?
I'm in the right
You
file.
need to be in bundle 3, BB 16.
Yeah, BB 16, 808 is a letter to Nengiza Hofmeyer. What's the page number?
Is this the same bundle that you had open when you were looking at
Sorry, what's the page number?
808?
Sorry, I was on the red 808.
Okay. Yeah. It's that time of the day when one starts confusing the red numbers with the black numbers.
Well, it was happening to me yesterday.
Yes, 808.
Okay. So what they say, this is dated 16 October.
This
Let's
is
go through
before we did the settlement.
it. No, this is after the settlement.
Yes.
Okay, so they say the 40 million proposal of settlement was believed to be fair, inclusive of legal costs or whatever. Given the extra information required by Transnet and the detail of lost revenue, so now they're providing lost revenue,
Yes.
we think that settlement of 60 million would be justifiable.
Yes.
So you see, now they don't just want costs, they also want compensation for lost revenue.
Yes.
Now let's look what you do, is you respond at 803, and at 803, perhaps I could read this into the record. You address it to Abalosi. Dear Sirs, Transnet stroke Abalosi Risk Advisory Services. Your letter dated 16 October 2014 herein refers. Without admission of liability, Transnet SOC hereby offers you an amount of 20 million
Yes.
in full and final settlement of all legal claims and costs.
Yes.
We'd be pleased to receive your response to the aforesaid offer within 7 days of receipt.
Yes.
Now, as you've correctly said, or as you say, you went from 95 million to costs.
Yes.
But this amount that you settled on wasn't settlement for costs. It was something else. It was costs and lost revenue and we don't know what. And that's really the problem, Mr. Molefe, because when you look at the settlement agreement that you concluded,
Yes.
Transnet's only obligation was to pay costs.
Yes.
They write to you and they say, well, we want 60 million,
Yes.
which includes costs and lost revenue, etc. And you go back and say, well, I'll give you 20 million.
Yeah.
So what were you paying this money for?
If you look at the document before,
Yes, which one?
on 801,
Yes.
it says the purpose of this submission is to request the Group Chief Financial Officer
Yeah.
to authorize the payment of 20 million. Oh, sorry.
Yes, now we've seen this because that came after you had
Yes.
actually made this offer. So they accepted your offer, perhaps not unsurprisingly. And then Mr. Salinga and Singh actioned payment. But what I want to ask you is what were you paying this 20 million for? You made the counter offer. It can only be costs on the evidence that you've given.
Chairperson, I think I must have made a mistake here
Yes, you must have.
because what we were supposed to have paid was the costs.
You gave away 20 million rand, actually.
I can tell you, Mr. Molefe, I wouldn't be candid with you if I didn't tell you that when I read just the settlement agreement, I was shocked.
Yes.
It's just shocking.
Yes.
Those terms of the settlement agreement are shocking. In all the years that I was in practice before I came onto the bench, I'd never seen a settlement agreement like this. I'd never seen a settlement agreement like the one that Mr. Gama and Transnet concluded. When you settle, because the basis of a settlement is, look, we don't know who was going to win or lose in the end if we proceeded with litigation. That's
Yes.
the basis. Yes. So let's settle. That's normally the basis. Of course, sometimes there might be other considerations, but normally you would have each party paying its own costs.
Yes.
But sometimes you do have the one party making some contribution to the cost of the other, usually not all the cost, just some contribution.
Yes.
But maybe you might have a situation where they pay party and party costs, okay?
Yes.
But for one of the parties in a settlement agreement to pay attorney and client costs
Yes.
is something I had never come across. I don't know about Mr. Mybeck.
Yeah. Chairperson, may I make a request?
That's apart from what Mr. Mybeck has just drawn attention to say the amount was not just for costs. You were paying for much more than that, even though the settlement agreement said Abalosi had withdrawn its action against Transnet.
Yes. May I make a request, Chairperson?
Yes.
Because my recollection of this matter may be very fuzzy
Yeah.
now. That I go and look at this matter again
Okay.
and then come back, maybe
That's
by
fair
way
enough.
of a supplementary affidavit or something like that.
Yeah, no, arrangements can be made even if you come back, I think, because it wouldn't take long. I don't know what Mr. Mybeck has to say, but that
Yeah,
may...
I would really like to go and interrogate this matter again.
Mr.
All
Mybeck?
right, I'm happy to leave it there. Thank you, Chair.
Yes,
There's just
okay.
one other fact that I want to just put to you, and that is Mr. Todd, if my memory serves me correctly, said that the costs couldn't conceivably have been more than R1 million because very little had happened in this litigation. There'd been an exchange of pleadings, and if my memory serves me correctly, I think they might have got to the discovery affidavit stage. But this
Yes.
litigation was not far advanced at all
Yes.
Mr. Molefe, perhaps that's something that you could think about.
And just to add on to that, you know, if you look at the legal costs relating to Mr. Gama, I think in their legal costs, they had the legal cost of the disciplinary hearing, which had involved senior counsel and so on, and had gone on for about 14 days, 2 weeks. The costs for that, I think, were less than 4 million, less than, I can't remember, but 5. You're not talking about even 10 million, I think. Maybe, Mr., but certainly not 20 million. Here, the matter had not gone to trial. Some pleadings had been exchanged. It had not advanced much.
Yeah, please allow me, Chairperson, to go and refresh.
No,
my
no,
memory on
that's
this.
fair enough. That's fair enough, yeah. That's fair enough. Okay, Mr. Maide?
Yes, thank you. I would like then, late in the afternoon, Mr. Molefe, to deal with the final topic, and that relates to witnesses 1 and 3. Do you have bundle 14D available? Maybe to round off the topic of that settlement, Mr. Molefe.
Yes.
And Mr. Maibeg, maybe there are 2 ways of dealing with it. One is that after Mr. Molefe has studied it and tried to recall what happened, one option is that he can come back and then put his understanding, give me his understanding and explanations without an affidavit. Another one is that he could put in an affidavit first to say, this is my recollection of how this came about, blah, 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 blah. And then, if need be, he could be called after that. I don't know, Ms. Maibeg, if you have any preference, what you suggest.
I think that the latter route might be preferable because potentially he may not need to be recalled then.
Yes, yes.
But in your hands, Chairperson.
Chairperson, I thought it would also be prudent that we make a proposal on how, or have
Yes.
an input on how we can handle this remaining matter.
Yes, yes.
I still have to get instructions. So we'll get instructions, Chair, and revert back to Mr. Mebe on what would be the best way forward.
No, that's fine. If that could be, if what the arrangement is going to be can be finalized, if possible, within the next 2 days, because we don't have a lot of time, so that we, at least to say, this is the agreed way forward, and then we can take it from there.
Thanks, Chair.
Okay, all right.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Mayor.
Do you have bundle 14D? Can I ask you please to go to...
But Mr. Essa was not the director of Abalosi.
Well, I don't know. General Nyanda, your golf partner, was the director of Abalosi. That's perhaps a bit closer to home. All right.
Well, maybe I should say this. No, maybe I shouldn't say you put in whatever you put in about that settlement, and then we'll take it from there. Yeah, okay. At least not you, and you are not being told about Salim Essa in regard to Abalosi. What bundle did you say we should have?
14,
Okay.
little d, DCJ.
Yes. Thank you.
So,
What page?
page, I think it's 15, 1-5.
Yes, I've got it.
Now, Mr. Molefe, I mean, given the importance of this, I think it may warrant us going through it on a paragraph by paragraph basis almost. Are you in the right file?
Yes. Yes, Chair.
Page 15, witness 1. But perhaps before I pick my way through this affidavit, could I just ask you to give us a summary of what your response is to witness 1's affidavit, and I suppose in particular from page 1 through to, which would be 15 through to 24, up to the heading threats received.
Well, Chairperson, firstly, I do not know who witness 1 is.
I'm sorry, Mr. Maybeck, I think it might be good for those who are following to just give a general, the gist of what witness 1 said about Mr. Molefe, so that when he gives his own, the gist of his response, then they can follow. Is that going to be difficult? If it's going to be difficult, it's fine.
Well, I think generally, by way of very broad summary, what
Yeah.
witness 1 says is that he was effectively Mr. Molefe's driver when he was at Transnet, and that he took him on a number of occasions to the Gupta compound in Saxonwold and to other meetings with the Guptas, and he gives certain evidence relating to money. That's perhaps as
Yeah.
broadly stated as it can be.
Okay, no, that's fine. I just wanted that when Mr. Molefe gives his response to this evidence, people who are listening can understand what it's about.
Yes, Chairperson. I do not know who witness 1 is. But I suppose even if I assumed the identity of who the identity of witness 1 is, it is difficult for me to impute motive without identifying witness 1. So
Sorry, what did you say?
it is difficult for me to impute motive
Yeah.
for giving this kind of evidence without knowing who witness 1 is. But secondly, witness 1 does not say that he saw anybody give me money. He refers to meetings that I had with the Guptas that I have not denied. And however, he talks about bags and a bag as if those bags had money, but he had no evidence that there was money in the bag. So really, there is very little to respond to in the evidence of witness 1.
Okay.
Well, let's just accept for a moment that he doesn't give evidence on your construction of having seen someone give you money. But apart from that, do you then agree with the statement? Or what ultimately are you saying?
That somebody gave me money.
No. Your analysis of his evidence is he says very little, he doesn't give direct evidence, you say, of people giving me money.
Yes.
But what do you say to the content of his evidence, that he took you to all of these places? What do you say about his observations? Are you saying they're all wrong? Or are you saying, well, they're right, but he doesn't give evidence of someone giving me money?
His observations that he saw me with a bag may be true, but I would deny that it had money in it, or that the bag I was carrying, when I went to a meeting and came back from the meeting, came back with money. I would deny that.
So let's just go through, if you go to paragraph 10 of the affidavit at page 17. When you say you don't know who witness 1 is, well, he says that he acted as your driver for 3 years.
Did he?
3 or 4 years.
Yes, so who is he?
Well, didn't you also say earlier that you know who he is?
Come again?
Didn't you also say that you know who he is?
No, I said I could assume who he is.
Yes.
And, but assuming who he is not fair because I cannot impute motive on a person based on assumption of identity.
But what are you saying? A bad motive, that you had a driver who may have had a bad motive for this evidence?
Yeah, there is a driver that I know would have had a motive, but I don't think I can reveal what I think was the
No,
motive.
absolutely.
Because it would identify them, number one, and number two, what if my assumption about the identity is wrong?
But then, Mr. Molefe, can I ask you, why did you not exercise your right to cross-examine this person?
Because he did not implicate me in wrongdoing.
Okay, so that's really your defense, that there's no implication of
There's no
wrongdoing.
implication of wrongdoing.
So are you prepared generally to accept the statement, but your main opposition or defense is it doesn't implicate me in wrongdoing?
It doesn't implicate me in wrongdoing. It
All right.
just implicates me in sometimes carrying a bag that I always carry that he took a picture of. No, didn't even take a picture of the bag.
Yes,
Downloaded it from the internet
yeah,
and said that is the bag that I may have been carrying or a similar bag.
yeah. All right.
Mr.
I
Maibek-
might show you, I might
Mr.
ask you to
Maibek-
show me your bag later, but yes.
Mr. Maibek, as I walked into the
Yeah.
commission, I may have been carrying a bag. In fact, I was. And if somebody sees me leave the commission with that bag and says that, look, it looks like it's got money inside, I have to answer to that allegation.
All right, so let's go through this. He says that, or she, and I'm going to perhaps just refer to he, and I don't mean to disclose the gender of the person, but it will be easier. During the above-mentioned period, Transnet's head officers, so this is 11 to 14, were still in the Colton Centre in Johannesburg. Is that right?
Yes,
And then it says that on a normal working day, I would collect Molefe from his home in Irene, Pretoria at around 6 o'clock in the morning, transport him to the office at Colton Centre and or to meetings during the course of the day and drop him off at home in the afternoon. He often attended meetings and functions till late in the evenings, and on many occasions I'd only arrive home at around midnight. I also had to work quite a lot over weekends. Would that be an accurate description of the work of your driver?
yes,
Then the driver says, usually on Friday afternoon, Molefe's personal assistant, PA, would provide me with a printout of Molefe's diary for the following week, which would inform me of his meeting schedule and movements for that week. Would you agree with that?
yes,
And at 14, due to the long work hours required to transport Molefe to various destinations during the week, I requested one of my other CPOs, my colleague, during late 2012 to assist me with the protection and transporting of Molefe. We used to alternate our working schedules so that one of us would transport Molefe whilst the other one would perform administrative tasks. My colleague continued in this regard until approximately December 2014. Do you agree with that?
yes,
15, towards the end of July 2014, I was redeployed as security manager at Transnet Group Capital Division in Durban. I transferred back to the Transnet head office during January 2016. What do you say to that?
If he's the guy that was redeployed to Devon, there's a lot to say about that, but it would reveal his identity.
All right. Then 16, during the period of providing CPO services to Molefe, the following Transnet vehicles were used to transport him. not going to read all of them out. There's a BMW, another BMW, a Mercedes-Benz, and an Audi A8.
Yes.
17, the driver says, I kept logbooks of trips undertaken with the above-mentioned vehicles. Would you accept that logbooks were kept?
Yeah, I never looked at them. I knew that they were handed to the head of security.
At
And,
18, sorry, anything else to say?
no.
18, used logbooks from the drivers of Transnet executives were handed to General Toka. At the time, the general manager of security at Transnet for safekeeping, I kept my logbooks for audit purposes. Any comment on that?
Well, I'm not sure if this was in line with their standard operating procedures, but yes.
Then we have the heading Meetings with AJ Gupta. During the period, and this is now February 2011 to July 2014, during the period of performing CPO duties for Molefe, I transported him on various occasions to the Gupta residence in Saxonwald, Johannesburg, the Michelangelo Hotel in Sandton, the Protea Hotel Fire and Ice in Melrose Arch, and the offices of Sahara Computers in Midrand, where he attended meetings with AJ Gupta. AJ, do you agree with that?
Yes. Generally, yes. It is true that there were occasions when we went. I don't have a recollection of every single incident.
Sure. These meetings were not recorded in his diary.
I can't recall that they were or were not recorded in my diary.
I was either informed by Molefe that he was going to meet with AJ, or I actually saw AJ at these venues, or both.
Yes.
In paragraph 20, copies of available logbook entries confirming trips undertaken to the locations mentioned above are attached hereto as annexes W101 to W115. The logbook entries are summarized in this table. Have you had a chance to look at this table?
Yes.
So what the table reflects is that in the 14-month period between July 2011 and September 2012, the driver took you to Saxonwald on 11 occasions, twice to the Michelangelo, once to the Fire and Ice, and once to Sahara.
Yes, I can't comment on it because I don't have a clear recollection of every single incident. But as I said,
But it seems, would you dispute what is said here?
no.
All right. Now, you will see that at page 21, after the schedule, references in the logbook to Saxonwald, Saxonwald, etc. are all
Paragraph 21.
just above 21. There's a key there where he explains that any reference really to Saxon or Saxonwald is a reference to the Gupta residence. Reference to the Michelangelo is the Sandton Michelangelo. Reference to Melrose Arch, presumably it should be hotel, refers to the Protea Fire and Ice, and Midrand Sahara refers to the offices of Sahara Computer.
Yes.
After September 2012, I no longer transported Molefe to Gupta Saxonwald residence. Any comment on that?
September 2012.
He says, after September 2012, I no longer transported Molefe to Gupta Saxonwald residence. My colleague at 22 informed me that he's also taken Molefe to the Gupta residence on a few occasions. Any comment on that?
So after September 2012 is when he went to Devon.
Well, he said he no longer transported you.
Yeah, but was it because he had gone to Devon?
It's not as I understand the evidence. He says it
Well,
was towards the end of July 2014 that he was redeployed to Durban.
Oh, I see, yes. Yeah, okay.
So you agree with that?
Yeah, I can't comment on it. I can't really recall when he,
Then, at paragraph 23, in relation to trips to the Gupta residence, Molefe would tell me that he had to go and see AJ.
yes,
On arrival at the Gupta residence, I would wait for Molefe in our vehicle to return. As can be seen from the table above, the visit to the residence usually lasted between 20 and 45 minutes.
yes,
What do you say to that?
yes. That is a reasonable assessment of what was happening.
Those are relatively short meetings.
Oh, no, I mean, 20 to 45, not short. 10 minutes would be short.
20 maybe would be short,
10 minutes would be short.
and 20 you would say not short.
45 is about reasonable time to have a meeting.
No. I don't have a problem myself about 45 minutes being, not an unusual time for a meeting.
Yes,
I'm talking about 20 because I think somewhere he says in his, the logbook or whatever he has put in there, reflects like you would come in there, you'd go there and spend about 20 minutes and go, I think quite a few times, if I'm not mistaken. Would you, and it gives me the impression, and this is maybe I must just say, gives me the impression that that might not have been serious meetings, if it's so short, but I may be mistaken.
yes,
If it's so short,
yeah.
yeah, okay. But generally, you don't have any quarrel with the kinds of times he gives in terms of the duration whenever you went there. More or less, you have no problem with
Yes,
those times.
yes.
Okay.
Yeah, he just doesn't mention perhaps when there were events.
When they were?
Events.
Events, yeah,
Yeah,
okay.
like a
Yes,
function. Or,
yes, yeah, when you would be there longer.
Yes, he
Yeah.
doesn't mention those.
Yeah.
Perhaps, sorry, DC Joe, you finished.
Yes, no, maybe you are going to say what I was about to say.
No, please, you.
Okay, no, I was saying, maybe during the time that he took you there, there were no events as such. Maybe that's why.
I can't recall, Chair.
Yeah, okay,
can't
all
recall.
right. Okay.
Just in that regard, could I take you back to page 20, please? You have a look at this table.
Paragraph 20.
No, page 20, the table. See the first entry at the top. 29 July 2011, Saxonwald.
Yes,
You arrive at 10 and leave, at 6 o'clock in the morning and leave at 17 minutes past 6 in the
Yes.
morning.
yes,
And then the fifth entry in the middle of the page, on the 19th of October, you arrived at 10 to 6 in the evening and you left at 6 o'clock. So that's a 10-minute meeting. The first one is 17 minutes.
yes,
And then if you go over the page to page 21, the second entry on the 28th of May, 2012, you arrive at 20 to 7 in the evening and you leave at 10 to 7 in the evening, 10 minutes.
yes.
What would you have been doing?
That is what he says.
Well, that's
So
what the logbooks say.
but I can't comment on the accuracy of the logbook.
But what can you think of what you might be doing for only 10?
I don't remember what it was about. And I can't comment that these entries are correct.
But I think what you do say, based on what you have said before, is you might not be saying they are accurate, but your sense is that they can't be two-way out. It's
may
more or
be-
less. It's more or less what you think.
They may not even have happened in the way that he describes them in the logbook, but I have no way of showing that.
Yeah.
Because Well, that is what he wrote in his
Yeah.
logbook.
Well, there are
And
times
I'm
where,
not sure when he made these entries in his logbook.
there are times where, according to his logbook, you were there for a few hours. I see at page 20, second item,
Yes.
29 July 2011, according to the logbook, his logbook, you were there from 5 to 10 past 9. So I
Yes.
think there are times when it reflects you were there for quite some time.
Yes.
And then there are times when it reflects that you were there for
Yes.
a shorter
Yes.
periods.
But you see, I don't dispute that he did take me there. And
Yes.
that maybe he kept a logbook that I was
Yes.
not aware of. But I'm not sure about the accuracy
Yeah.
of what is in his logbook. And really what his motive was for keeping the logbook. I don't know if he.
Well, I
suppose
guess
he
the
showed you-
logbook has got to say when you arrived, where you arrived, and when you left. I assume that that's part of what they are supposed to do.
Yes, but, and then the logbook is handed over to his general manager for safekeeping. But he says he didn't. He kept the logbook. So I'm not sure what the motive was there. Because as he says here, it was for audit purposes. Well, if anybody wanted to audit his logbook, it would be found with the general manager for security. So I'm not sure what his motive really was.
Okay. Mr. Maive?
Yes,
And
thank
in fact, he may have been in breach of their own standard operating procedures because the logbook was supposed to be handed over to head of security.
Then at paragraph 24, at page 22, when we visited the Gupta residence in Saxonwald and the offices of Sahara Computers, the security guard would ask, "Who are we visiting?" And Molefe would inform that we are visiting AJ. I would then relay the name of AJ to the security guard who would then permit access. Would you agree with that?
Yes, I would normally visit AJ.
25, in relation to the visits to the hotels, I would park the vehicle and accompany Molefe, alternatively meet Molefe at a restaurant when I would at some stage during the meeting see AJ. Do you agree with that?
Yes, well, I can't comment on,
Sure.
on who he saw or who he identified as AJ.
26, Molefe usually went into the Gupta residence with a light brown leather backpack that he would carry with him. A picture of the brown leather backpack, similar to the one carried by Molefe, is attached, Annexure W116. Should we go to that? That you find at pages 55.
Did he say similar?
Sorry?
Did he say similar?
Yes.
I think so.
It's not 100% similar.
Okay, so
but this
that you
that is
find-
just a backpack.
Okay, that you found, sorry, at page 66. Did you have a similar brown leather backpack to that one?
Not like this one.
Or did you have the one that you've got on the chair next to you?
Yes, it was this one.
It was
My
that one.
trusted bag, yes.
There we go.
Yeah.
All right, so that is a brown leather backpack.
Yes, this is it's a brown leather backpack.
And is that in fact, it looks quite worn. It was the same backpack that you had at the time.
Yes, Chairperson, I've been everywhere with this bag. I'm surprised that
It's like my briefcase. It's also falling
I'm
apart.
surprised that it is accused number 2 at the commission.
You see, the problem might be that wherever you went with it.
Yes,
Okay, so
and I still do.
Yeah. But earlier on, I thought you said something like looking at, I don't know which page you were looking at, I think one of the bags, pictures of the bags. I thought you said it's not similar, but
If you look at
the impression I got was that you were saying there is some resemblance. It might
No,
not
this
be.
is a backpack.
Yeah.
It is not quite similar to this one.
Well, that is a brown leather backpack, I suppose.
Well, that's why I was saying, well, this is a backpack.
All right.
So this is just an arbitrary backpack.
So, Mr. Molefe, I suppose if it wasn't so serious, it might be funny. But do I understand you to be saying that that backpack that you've just showed the chairperson, your trusty brown leather backpack, was in fact the same one that you had
In
at this
all
time?
likelihood, it was this one.
The same one? All right.
Yes.
Well, shouldn't we have a picture of this one so we can compare with the pictures here?
Yes.
No, I'm saying it was likely to have been this one.
All right.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So, then at 27, on other occasions, so 26, Molefe usually went into the Gupta residence with his light brown leather backpack that he would carry with him. We've dealt with that. 27, on other occasions, Molefe would go into the Gupta residence without his leather backpack. On those occasions, he would then reappear carrying a sports bag, which appeared to contain something. I say this because the shape of the bag.
Okay, I'm sorry, Mr. Mybeck, I may have missed something. So at 26, this witness refers to a light brown leather backpack.
Yes.
That description is the same as the bag you say is probably the one that you were carrying?
Yes. No.
When he says
No, the description.
light brown leather backpack, does
Yeah.
that fit that
Yeah, but
description?
his evidence is that the bag that he saw
Yeah,
is the one that he took the picture of here.
okay.
So let's go with the description that is in this picture then, because that is his evidence.
Okay. I'm sorry, Mr. Mybeck, I interrupted you.
Thank you. So he says at 27, on other occasions, Molefe would go into the Gupta residence without his leather backpack. On those occasions, he would then reappear carrying a sports bag, which appeared to contain something. I say this because the shape of the bag suggested it had contents. You want to respond to
The
that?
shape of the bag suggested?
It had contents.
I have no recollection of that, Chair.
So this paragraph you don't recall.
Yes.
Then says at 28, on 18 January 2012, Molefe instructed me to deliver an empty leather carrier bag to AJ at the offices of Sahara Computers in Midrand. I did so and handed the bag to AJ. The bag was open when it was handed to me. A picture of the brown leather carrier bag, similar to the one discussed here, is attached as Annexure W117. You go to that. That you find at page 69.
Yes.
What do you say to that?
I have no recollection of that.
If you go back to 28, the driver says a copy of the...
I'm sorry,
Yes.
Mr. Mybeck. Will you arrange for somebody in your team to write, for example, in regard to the bag, picture of the bag at page 69, Annexure W1-17, so that if I read this paragraph, it's easy for me to know this is the one, because it's not
Yes,
written.
DCJ, I perhaps have referred you to the wrong page. That has been done.
Oh, is
The
that so?
W1-17, there's a cover page to each of these things. That you'll find at page 68.
Oh, okay.
I do apologize.
Oh, okay. Oh, you see that it's confusing because you expect the picture to be
Yes,
on page 68 when you look at this.
yes.
So maybe what should be done is to move this to 69, or to find a way to make sure that if I'm looking for this picture and I come to 68 and I see there's no picture, I don't think that there's nothing, and then I go back. Or maybe there should be a reference to say, I must look.
Over the page.
Over the page,
All right.
yeah.
We'll work on that,
Yeah,
DCJ.
yeah. You know, 2 months after now, if I'm working on this, I might be confused.
Just out of curiosity, does his diary confirm this trip?
Sorry?
Does his diary confirm this trip?
I beg your pardon? Well, he said, I wanted to take you to the last portion of paragraph 28. A copy of the logbook entry confirming the trip
Oh, I see.
undertaken to the offices of Sahara Computers is attached as W118.
Okay. I have no recollection of it.
No recollection. Then at 29, I recall that I also met AJ in the presence of Molefe in January 2012 after the African National Congress conference in Bloemfontein, when I collected Molefe from the airport in Bloemfontein. Do you have any issue with that?
He saw AJ at the airport in Bloemfontein.
Yes. He met AJ, I also met AJ in the presence of Molefe.
I have no recollection of what happened at the airport in Bloemfontein in January 2012.
I might just have a second. You have no recollection of that.
Yes.
Then at 30, I attach a photograph of AJ as annexure W119 as confirmation that he is the person that I have been introduced to as AJ. Presumably you don't have any issue with that.
Yes.
All right. And then people recognized at Gupta residence. During visits to the Gupta residence on several occasions, I have, amongst others, seen the following people outside the Gupta residence, namely Minister Malusi Gigaba, former Minister of the Department of Public Enterprises, and Mr. Siyabonga Mahlangu, Special Advisor to Minister Gigaba. What do you say to that?
I can't remember being at the same time at the Gupta residence with Minister Gigaba or with Mr. Siyabonga Mahlangu. No, that I can't remember.
So one thing I perhaps neglected to ask you earlier on in your testimony when discussing your relationship with the Guptas and your visits to the Gupta residence, is who would you see there?
Mr. AJ.
Yes, but who else?
He's the person that I was discussing the bank with.
Sorry?
He is the person that I was discussing the bank with.
Yes.
Yes, so I would hardly ever see anybody else.
On those occasions when you did see someone else, who were they?
Sometimes his brother would pop in, Tony or Atul or his wife or his children. Yeah, they would pop in, but the person that I really saw and discussed with was Mr. AJ.
So do I take it to be then your evidence that you never saw any politician during your visits there, that you never saw any...
Perhaps when there were functions. But yeah, I don't remember being there when there was no function and seeing Mr. Gigaba or Mr. Siyabonga Mahlangu.
All right, and then there's a heading saying Molefe in possession of cash.
Yes.
Paragraph 32.
Yes.
One day, whilst attending a meeting in the main boardroom at the Carlton Centre, Molefe asked me to fetch his cellular phone from his bag in his office.
Yes.
As instructed, I went to his office, and when I opened his light brown leather backpack to take out the phone, I was surprised to see that the bag was more than half full with bundles of 200 Rand notes. I called Mbele to Molefe's office and I showed her the cash in his bag. Now, what do you say to that?
I have no recollection of that incident, and I just wonder if he did write it in his incident report and if he reported it to General Tuka, but I have no recollection of that incident.
Well, let's just go through this. Presumably you did have meetings on occasion in the main boardroom at the Colton Centre.
Yes.
If you had left your cell phone in your bag, might you try and retrieve it by asking somebody in the position of your driver to do so?
I might have, yes.
It's possible that that happened.
It's possible that I might have asked him to retrieve a cell phone during the time that I was working with him from my bag.
From your light brown leather backpack.
Yes.
So the only issue is you say, well, if I had asked him to do that, he wouldn't have come across these bundles of 200 Rand notes.
No, not in the manner that he described them as being this much and stacked and so on and so forth.
But he says, I was surprised to see the bag was more than half full with bundles of 200 Rand
No,
notes.
not half full.
But would you...
I have no recollection of this incident where he says he found a half full bag, half full. My bag half full with money. I have no recollection of that specific incident. And on top of that, it is I never carried cash like that.
Now, he says, I called Mbele to Molefe's office and showed her the cash in the bag. Who's that?
That was my PA.
So just so that I have your evidence correctly, your evidence is you never kept money or any real quantity of money.
Come again?
You never kept money or any real quantity of money in your in the bag you've shown us.
Not half full.
Well,
Just maybe if there was
Quarter?
cash. Sorry?
Quarter full?
No, maybe 1,000 Rand, maybe 2,000 Rand. I don't know how that would fill the bag.
Okay.
Then at paragraph 33, upon his return from the meeting, I approached Molefe about the fact that he was carrying that much cash in his bag, which I considered a safety risk. Molefe was visibly upset with my comment and told me that it was none of my business. You say to that?
I have no recollection of that and wonder if, because he says it is a safety or a security risk, whether this threat, security, because that's what it identified a threat according to him, was properly recorded and discussed with his superiors.
But, Mr. Molefe, how does one deal with this? I mean, here is a driver. You say, really, that 90% of the statement you don't dispute. It's only when the word cash really enters the equation that you say you don't have a recollection. You say you could have been in a meeting in the main boardroom.
Well, I'm sorry, Mr. Mybeck, I'm sure you don't intend it. There are a number of areas where he said he has no recollection.
Yes, sir.
But what you are saying is true to the extent that you mean he doesn't dispute
Yes, I feel.
most of this, yeah.
Yes.
But that also includes when he says he has no recollection. So I thought I would just mention
There is no
that.
recollection, Chair.
Yeah, but basically because you don't have a recollection, you can't dispute, but there is nothing that you really seriously dispute for most of the part of what
No,
he says.
I dispute that
This particular part
of the cash.
of the cash, yeah. No,
Yeah, where he says he saw cash.
Yeah.
Where he says if he wants, or if if his desire was to imply that I left the Gupta residence with cash, that I dispute.
Yeah, no, that's fine.
But then,
other
but
than
then I
that,
noticed
yeah,
that he never went that far.
yes. But other than that, in terms of what Mr. Maybeck has taken you through, you don't have any serious issues.
No, I mean, this narrative is built on real facts that were happening.
Yeah, okay.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, Mr. Maybeck, I interrupted you while
Yes,
you
thank
wanted
you.
to put a proposition to Mr. Molefe.
Yes, perhaps I can restyle it. In relation to this particular incident that he recounts here, would you accept that if he had come across a lot of money in your bag, it would have been a natural thing perhaps for him to have raised it with your PA?
No. Let me put it like this, because he calls it a security threat. If he had come across a security threat, he wouldn't have raised it with my PA. He would have and should have raised it with his superiors. And in this instance, it was General Doga. And there would have been a proper incident report.
Yes, but you see, what he says is that you were upset and you told him that it was none of your business.
But-
He raised it with you directly.
But it didn't matter that I was upset about it, because his job was security, and if he identified a security threat, there would have been a particular protocol to deal with it. And so I can't recall the incident. I'm just saying, if it indeed did happen, this is what would have happened. He would not, he would not have raised it with a PA, because he knew that that would start a rumor and exacerbate the threat, which means that if he raises it with a PA might then say to somebody else or the next one, you won't believe what Mr. So-and-so told me today. And then it would be a rumor that goes around. And so a person of his training and his responsibilities, the responsible manner to have handled it would have been, especially that he specifically says that it was a security threat or a security risk, would have been to raise it with his superiors, who would then have called me in and said, we have a problem, how do we deal with it? That never happened. That never happened. However, having said that, I dispute that this cash incident happened.
Just so that I understand it, so your backpack that you've shown us with your, if you had left your cell phone in your backpack, would that backpack then be in your office? Is that, you say, I went to his office. As you've said, if you had left your phone and you were in a meeting, you might ask your driver to go and fetch it from your office. Is that right?
If I had left it in my office and I'd said, go and fetch my phone, I mean, this is hypothetically.
And I take it your secretary or your PA worked close to your office?
Yes, right next door.
Then at paragraph 34, I furthermore frequently deposited cash amounts on behalf of Molefe at Absa, Standard Bank and Nedbank in and around the Colton Centre in various bank accounts.
Yes.
Usually between the 28th of the month and the 5th of the following month, and sometimes also around the middle of the month.
Yes.
What do you say about that?
It may or may not have happened on some occasions that maybe I asked him to make a deposit for me. I can't recall what it was for different things. Maybe society, or I don't know, I can't recall. But that may or may not have happened. I'm not sure about the frequency that he's talking about. But it is true that on one or two occasions, I may have sent him to go to the bank.
You drew cash to deposit cash?
No, not necessarily. Sometimes when we go to a burial society and people donate cash, and then I have to take it and bank it. Things like that.
But Wouldn't it,
Or sometimes if I'm doing it for somebody or for whatever reasons, I had personal reasons.
but why not just make an electronic transfer?
No, but if it was cash that needed to go to the bank, you can't deposit it electronically.
So what sort of things would this relate to then,
Like the society, you know, society.
right? What
Yes.
type of society?
Burial societies, burial society.
Right? What other things?
I can't recall, Chair, what other reasons I may have had to have had cash with me, but
But there could have been,
yeah, they could have been for a number of reasons.
Was there a burial society of which you were treasurer or something
Yes, yes,
at that time?
yes, at the time, yes, there was.
What was it called?
Mapala, Mapala,
M-A-P-H-A-L-A?
double M-A, double M-A,
Yeah,
P-H-A-L-A.
yes, burial society at the end.
Yeah, it's actually officially it's called investment society. So it's the Mapala
Yeah,
was my grandmother's mother. So it's all the children that have descended from that root.
yes.
We have a burial society, and I was
Yes.
the treasurer.
And you were the treasurer?
Yes,
Okay. Okay. It's still there, it still exists.
it
The
still
burial
exists,
society.
but we haven't met since COVID, and
Yeah.
there's a big debate now about what we're going to do.
Okay.
then the driver goes on to say the deposit slips and account details had been completed by Molefe. Is that what you would do if you were required of him to deposit cash?
Yes, yes.
The cash amounts would be handed to me by Molefe's PA in envelopes which Molefe had handed to her with the instruction that I should do the deposit. Would you agree with that?
Yes,
I handed the deposit slip to either Molefe's PA or Molefe himself after doing the deposits at the bank. Would you agree with that?
yes.
And he says, or the driver says at 35, I would count the money for deposit. It varied in amounts, but usually several thousand rand at a time.
Yes, several thousand, yes.
So it seems that the main area of disputes then, or dispute, is 27, the sports bag issue that you deny that you would leave the Gupta residence. You would reappear carrying a sports bag which appeared to contain something. You deny that you ever instructed the driver to deliver an empty leather bag to AJ, and then you deny this issue in relation to the cell phone and money being found in the bag. Those are the main areas of
Yes.
dispute. But otherwise, by and large, I think as the chairperson has asked you, you don't seem to take particular issue with the statement. Would that be a fair summary?
Other than to say that the threats that he talks about, I have no knowledge of. And I noticed that you say that we do not have a problem with the rest of the statement.
It was? Yes, I'm talking about the parts that I've taken you to.
Yes, yes.
Is this, as I understand it, it was reported in the press that there was an attempt on witness one's life a few
When?
days ago. Did you
4
read
days
it?
ago. Yes.
So have you got any idea? I mean, the person who made this statement is obviously in a difficult position in his life, the driver. There's threats being made on his life. He sets out the threats that gave rise to his driver's evidence being given in camera. Can I ask you to address the question of why would somebody put themselves into this position if their version was simply a pack of lies?
Which position?
position of fearing for your life.
Who's threatening his life?
Well, the point is that this person, and I'm not suggesting, Mr. Molefe, it's you, but what this driver has done,
Because I really don't understand that you're saying that because he made the statement, his life is now threatened. By who?
well, you've seen what he said about the threats that were made that caused the DCJ to allow his evidence to be given in camera. You've also heard about reports that there was an attempt on his life a few days ago.
Yes, Chair, I would really prefer not to be drawn into these threats and the reasons for the threats, and because I really don't know anything about it. And I also do not wish to speculate.
I think Mr. Mayberg wanted to put a different proposition to you in regard to probabilities or.
Yes, I mean, why would somebody falsely implicate someone like you in circumstances where they fear for their life?
Yeah, I said, Chair, I could try and impute motive, but that would identify the witness.
Yes.
But there is motive that I could impute.
And
Well, I guess that if this statement was full of lots of things that you say are false, maybe really serious bad things, one might look at it in a certain way, but having gone through the statement, with Mr. Mayberg having taken you through the statement up to just before he talks about the threats, most of the things that he says about you there, you don't identify them as things that somebody would be saying about you that are deliberately false. There are just 2 or 3 areas where you say, well, here, this is not true.
Yeah, so Chair, the way that the statement is crafted is that it is generally true, except that there is this spice of cash that gets put in, and that is cleverly calculated to imply, it's not even real evidence, to imply, just to cast aspersions. That is what I don't understand. This statement is based on things that are true, but it is designed to cast aspersions without even offering real evidence of things that the person saw. I remember when he was giving evidence, Chair, that you asked, so when you found the money in Mr. Molefe's bag, did that money come from the Guptas? And he said no. And so, when a security guard says, my principal gave me an empty bag to go and deliver, what is the purpose of making such a statement relating to an empty bag to an August commission such as this one?
Mr. Mayberg?
yes, thank you. I want to take you then to witness 3.
Yes.
That affidavit you find at page 122.
Yes.
Now, witness 3 says, and when dealing with the CPO services to Minister Gigaba, you would have seen that he says at paragraph 22, at page 126, that whilst waiting in my vehicle for Gigaba to return from meetings inside the Gupta residence, I noticed on different occasions people arriving or leaving the premises that I recognized. Individuals in this regard included, and there you see, firstly, your name, Brian Molefe. What do you say to that?
I can't comment on that, Chair. I have no recollection. Actually, witness 3, I even find it difficult to speculate about who it is. So I don't know what he's talking about.
But it seems to me that, I mean, you would accept that given the frequency with which you went to the Gupta residence, that it was possible that you would have been seen there
Yeah,
by other people.
witness 3 was attached to Mr. Gama, wasn't he?
Mr. Gigaba.
Mr. Gigaba. Yeah, I have said I do not recall being at the same time with Mr. Gigaba at the Gupta residence, unless if there was maybe a function, but I can't recall.
So let us then turn to paragraph 46 at page 130. Witness 3 says that this is under the heading bags received from men of Asian descent at Three Rivers Lodge. Witness 3 says, and this is at a time when he is providing services, CPO services to Mr. Anwar Singh, your CFO. He says at 46, during July 2014, Transnet Executive Management attended a week-long strategy session at the Three Rivers Lodge in Vereeniging.
Yes,
Would you accept that?
yes,
I dropped Singh off at the venue early in the week and picked him up on the Friday afternoon again.
yes,
While I waited for Singh on the Friday afternoon to finish at the session, I noticed 4 men who appeared to be from Asian descent, in brackets, they looked like Chinese men to me, close brackets, standing around a Hyundai H1 vehicle in the parking area. 2 of the men appeared to be busy with a conversation on a cellular phone. Any comment on that?
I deny that I ever met any Chinese people or Asian men at the Three Rivers Lodge during Transnet strategic planning session.
49, the next thing I noticed, how the 2 men, in brackets, who spoke on the cell phone, close brackets, took 2 luggage bags from the vehicle, one black and the other maroon, and went inside the lodge area where the executive management meeting was held.
I can't comment on that because that is what he saw. I did not meet the Chinese people at or Asian men at Three Rivers Lodge.
At around 1500 hours, I received a SMS from Singh requesting me to come to the conference room where the meeting was held. As I entered the room, the 2 men who took the luggage bags into the lodge were in the room together with Molefe and Singh.
I deny that happened.
But you were present at this conference with Mr. Singh.
Yes, there was, although I don't recall the exact dates, but I do recall that we once or twice had strategic planning sessions at the Three Rivers Lodge.
And when you had these week-long sessions, presumably they finish on a Friday.
Yeah,
At what time would you finish up typically with the
well,
conference?
it depends. It depends on our agenda for the day.
You'd presumably give people time to be able to travel back in the
Yes.
daylight hours?
Yes,
And this is in the winter time, we know.
this was in the winter time.
Yes, well, it was July
Yes, yes. It was,
2014.
oh, yeah. Because it was July, Chairperson, it is likely that it was winter time.
All right. Singh pointed to the maroon bag at paragraph 50 and requested me to take the bag to our vehicle, that being his stroke Singh's vehicle.
I don't know anything about that.
I took the bag and I put it in the boot of the vehicle. Then at paragraph 50.1 over the page 131, I need to mention that the bag was really heavy. I, however, did not know what it contained at the time. Sub 2, I recognized the bag as one of the luggage bags that the Chinese men had earlier taken into the meeting room. Any comment on that?
I can't comment on that. That is,
And then 51, while I was seated in our vehicle waiting for Singh after putting the maroon luggage bag in the boot of the vehicle, I saw Molefe's driver. Cannot clearly recall if it was witness one or a colleague, putting a black luggage bag from the same lodge venue to the vehicle that was used to transport Molefe. What do you have to say?
I deny that I met the Chinese people or Asian people at the Three Rivers Lodge. However, the taking a bag from the lodge to my car may be something that one of my protectors did, and that would have been a bag that I had come with my clothes. So, I mean, I deny that bag, if there was such a bag that was carried from the lodge to my car, came from the Chinese people, it may have been a bag that I had come with my clothes inside.
Yes, because witness 3 goes on to say, I recognize this bag as the other bag which the Chinese men had earlier taken into the meeting.
Then I deny that there was any bag from the Chinese people that was given to my protectors.
So just so that we understand the facts, there are 2 bags on this version that are taken into the conference center. One maroon bag, one black bag. On this version, a maroon bag goes back into Mr. Singh's car and the black bag goes into your car. You follow that?
Mr. Mybeck, I've just said to you that incident, as far as I am concerned, never happened. I don't know where this guy got it from. I'm not even in a position to speculate about this bag and that bag and this guy carrying that. I mean, the next thing you will be saying, so you admit that it did happen.
I'm just putting the facts to you on this statement.
I have denied that incident happened.
What I was trying to get at, if you just be a little bit patient, please, is I want to track what on this statement happened to the maroon bag. If you have a look at paragraph 52, the next Monday, Singh drove to the Carlton Centre with his BMW M3. You know Mr. Singh to drive an BMW M3?
Yeah, I just know he's a BMW guy. I don't know what type.
He left the vehicle in the basement for the week. That Friday afternoon, I was about to take Singh's vehicle to the car wash. As usual, I checked that there was no valuables in the boot that could go missing. As I opened the boot, I saw the maroon bag that I'd collected at the Three Rivers Lodge the previous Friday. When I picked the bag up, I realized that it weighed less than before. I opened the bag to see what was inside, and I noticed a couple of rolls of 200 Rand notes. I SMS'd Singh and informed him that the bag was still in the car. He immediately came down to the basement and collected the bag from me. So this is his version as to what happened to the maroon bag. I suppose the question is, what happened to the black bag?
I can't comment on that. There was no black bag that went to my car, Mr. Mybeck.
Right? So I want to just ask you some more general questions on this. So the evidence, and I don't want to overstate it, but the evidence of the money flows team, research that they've done, and I've put these things in fairness to you for the last 3 days, points to large-scale money laundering by the Guptas at Transnet. Of course, you are right that ultimately that finding would have to be made by the chairperson, but that's what the evidence points to. And what the evidence points to is that it's the procurement system that was abused by regiments and Mr. Essa to facilitate that money laundering. What the evidence also appears to point to is we know that contracts that you were involved in, confinements that you were involved in, that Mr. Singh was involved in, and Mr. Garma to a lesser extent, were contracts that were used as a vehicle for money laundering. I've put all of this to you.
All of them?
I said some, not all contracts, obviously. Contracts.
Yes.
We've been through the evidence. Now, assuming that the Guptas were involved in money laundering through an abuse of the procurement system, presumably those people that allowed that, I ask you, presumably there would be some kind of quid pro quo if those people were complicit. Would you agree with me?
What did you say?
So I'm not suggesting, when I put this proposition to you, that you were complicit in the money laundering. But if there were Transnet managers that enabled it, presumably there needed to be some kind of quid pro quo.
I can't comment. I don't know.
Because, you see...
Is that an assumption that you're making, that there would have been a quid pro
Well,
quo?
I would ask you to... One assumes that if you're complicit in money laundering and you're facilitating it as a manager, you need to
Yes.
get something in return,
Yes.
as a general proposition. Correct?
I don't know how those things work, Mr. Iber.
So just leaving Mr. Gigaba aside for a moment and just focusing on you and Mr. Singh. He was your CFO, correct?
Yes.
And when the two of you went to Eskom, you were replaced, swapped with Mr. Garma and Mr. Peter. Correct?
Yes. I think that is what happened.
And what these three drivers do, to a greater or lesser extent, is they implicate all of you in these three drivers. They implicate all of you to a greater or lesser extent in visiting the Guptas, and that didn't apply necessarily to Mr. Garma, but visiting the Guptas in some instances.
So
And-
what do they implicate me in?
Well, there's the statement.
Yeah, what do they implicate me in?
Well, what you, and just bear with me for a moment. They all, in relation to you, put you at the Gupta residence. The man gives some evidence about the fact, you say, I deny that I came with a full sports bag back to the car. I deny that I gave AJ Gupta a leather bag. I deny that there was money.
So what do they implicate me in? I just want to understand that.
What they point to is you carrying large amounts of money, certainly in relation to the cell phone issue. What I'm trying to get at, Mr.
No.
Yeah.
You're trying to get to that the Guptas gave me money.
Just bear with me for a moment. What we do know is they certainly say directly that Mr. Singh received bags of money. And they say Mr. Singh took the money to Knox Vault. At Knox Vault. You didn't have a safety deposit box there.
No.
Mr. Singh's replacement, Mr. Peter, drivers also give limited evidence about him going to the Gupta residence, but they also speak about bags going to the Knox Vault. That was his replacement. You've read, no doubt, or listened to the driver's evidence in relation to Mr. Garma, where that driver gives evidence of lots of cash being found in relation to Mr. Garma. You've seen that evidence. What ties the four of you together is that you had at least some connection with the Guptas. You had by far the strongest one. And that there's either direct evidence of large money transactions and collections, or indirect evidence, like in your case, where the driver says he had a half-full bag of 200 rand notes.
But he specifically says it didn't come from the Guptas, and I deny that there was ever a large sum of money in my bag.
Were you ever given money by Mr. Singh?
No, I can't recall that.
Would you say you can't recall? Might you have?
No, I can't recall that. I mean, maybe for lunch or something. I
No,
don't
that's
know.
not what I'm asking, Mr. Molefe.
No, I was never given, like how much?
Will you tell me?
No, I was never given money by Mr. Singh, unless if you're referring to maybe we were somewhere or I needed 100 rand for lunch or I don't know. But I was never given money by Mr. Singh.
Just on this issue of the replacements, I mean, you've seen the driver's statement in relation to Mr. Peter. My memory serves me correctly. He took him on, I think it is 15 occasions, to a restaurant in Turffontein where he had lunch with Mr. Essa.
I haven't seen that, no.
Or let me perhaps take you there. We were dealing with witness 3. Let me take you to that paragraph.
So you say
Well,
witness
I'm
3?
sorry. We normally take a short adjournment after 2 hours. We have been here for just over 3 hours now. Maybe we should have a 10 minutes adjournment.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay, let's take just 10 minutes adjournment. We'll resume at 5:25. We adjourn.